This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Hope you had a great Christmas. We had a great couple days off, but it is good to be back on Winnipeg Sports Talk with all of you live on YouTube, and shout out to all the podcast listeners. Lots to get to since we've been off. And unfortunately, the first 3-game losing streak of the year for the Winnipeg Jets will be all over it. Dave Poulin from TSN Hockey, who's been on the panel, I guess, for the last 3 Jet games, if I'm not mistaken, going to jump on with us first up. Jeff Hamilton as well. And then we're going to talk to Gord Miller from Halifax, of course, Canada, playing game number 2 of the World Junior Hockey Championship this afternoon after a loss in game number 1. But Gord also is quite instrumental in the Team Ukraine tour that's coming to Winnipeg on January 9th. So we'll talk a little bit about that, as well as how you can support and get out to watch Team Ukraine and the Manitoba Bisons play in that tour before they go to the World University Games. We'll get to a little bit of NFL talk as well, I'm sure, at some point, coming out of a wild Christmas weekend in the National Football League. I do want to give a big shout out to everyone, especially Mike Ladarney, who started this off hot with a nice super chat. Mike, thank you very much, and best of the season to you. And of course, a best of the season and a huge thank you to all the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. Coolbet Canada, Princess Auto, Little Brown Jug, Canadian Club, Culligan Water, Vita Health Fresh Market, Wallace & Wallace, Consolidated Supply, F Apparel, Manitoba Battery, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Boston Pizza, Royal Sports, and, of course, Not AutoCorp. Michael Remis, how are you? Did you enjoy a few days off? What's going on?
Yes, Hustler. It was pretty nice. And nice to have a day yesterday where it wasn't like freezing cold out, where you were actually able to go outside and maybe do some outdoor activities. But it was good to have a couple days off spent with family, visiting with friends. I loved having NFL on Saturday and Sunday because the hockey was off. We had World Juniors too, so definitely a lot going on. But I think the break came at a great time here for the Jets with that rough schedule. And I was kind of sad we weren't on Friday because we all knew Ovechkin was 100% getting the record against the Jets on Friday. I mean, it was a foregone conclusion, and we talked about that heading into the game.
Yeah, well, no, we were on Friday, but we guess we weren't on
We didn't
Saturday
get to talk about
Sunday.
it after.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be like,
I was
man.
happy we weren't, because that was the last thing I wanted to talk about at that point. And, listen, the Jets, just to quickly tail off the end of last week, really we're running on fumes going into the holidays. And, they'd finished 5 games in 7 days, starting on one coast, ending on the other. And even the 3 days off for Christmas, which I think was very important and much needed for the club. It's tough to mask everything that's happening with this hockey team right now. And it's certainly not through any lack of effort, but with the injuries piling up and what this team's been through, you knew this was going to be a really adverse time for the Winnipeg Jets. And, how they handle that going into these next couple games to finish off 2022 in the early point of January, I think is going to be very pivotal into what sort of a position the Winnipeg Jets are as we get into February and March. But certainly, thankfully, they've done a great job of stacking up wins in the first part of the season right now, because Remo, as we've talked about, they are up against it right now. And we saw a bunch of different looks last night, including completely stacking the top line with Pierre-Luc Dubois, Kyle Connor, and Mark Scheifele on the wing. But this is the first time all year where we've been talking about 3 straight losses, and it's not getting any easier as the Vancouver Canucks are red hot right now, been winning hockey games, and the Edmonton Oilers on the docket before we flip the calendar to 2023 in the beginning of January.
Yeah, the injuries, they're certainly starting to pile up. You were without Ehlers for a while, weathered that storm. Appleton and Menelainen go out. You have other guys like Isimont step up. And then Blake Wheeler out for a month with his groin surgery. Then Cole Perfetti's banged up for, a week or to 10 days. We'll wait and see how that one goes. So when you're missing, 5 regulars from your opening day lineup, especially guys who play in the top 6 who are counted on to score goals, you're in a tough spot. And I don't mind that they loaded up the top line. They need to score. I think Mark Scheifele was kind of had a rough go, Thursday and Friday last week with Perfetti and Poulin, and Friday's game where it was kind of on an island there. So put them in, try and score. Dubois did score a beauty goal, but they weren't able to shut down Minnesota, who put up a couple. And I agree, as thankfully the Jets banked all these points early on. This is going to come in handy. You look at the standings. There they are, 43 points, just behind Dallas, who I think is pretty good. Minnesota's catching up. Colorado, they're not quite healthy. McKinnon's still injured, and I think Nichushkin actually re-aggravated his injury, so they're still banged up. But so you're in a good spot. You can definitely afford to, I don't want to say afford to lose a couple, because that's never good, but
that just happened.
It just happened. You just lost 3, but you're still in second. So hopefully they can stop the slide. Vancouver coming in tomorrow. Edmonton Saturday. So 2 big Canadian matchups coming up.
Yeah. Oh, and the one thing is, I think Colorado and the Minnesota Wild both right there at winning percentage with the Winnipeg Jets. So, this is survival, I think, is the key word right now. Trying to just continue to keep their heads above water, power through, and try and, get a few points. And, listen, as far as last night's game goes, we can get to that right away, Remo. I like the effort from the Winnipeg Jets, although, and we'll hear from the coach in a minute. There was a real lack of, and again, I'm not sure whether this is because of the lines that the Jets were using, but there were times where the Jets' forecheck didn't seem to be as effective as it has been in the past. And I'll give the Minnesota Wild credit. They sort of rolled through the neutral zone at times without much problem doing so. Overall, though, I thought the Jets played well, and they battled back. That was a really tough start. As I said, listen, Connor Hellebuck gets a lot of slack, as he should. He's earned it. But those first 2 goals, I'm sure kept him up at night. Neither of them probably goes in 98 or 99 times out of 100. And yet there they were, down 2-0, right after Adam Lowry, with his signature move on a shorthanded breakaway, put it between the wickets of Philip Gustafsson and just guided the puck a little too far left, so it hit the post and went out. Rick Bowness talked about this, and again, we'll get to it in a minute, but the Jets, their ability to, they don't have a lot of room for error right now with the guys that are out of the lineup right now. And, those grade A chances you got to bury, and you certainly got to keep the ones out that went in last night. And other than that, to me, that was the real difference in the hockey game, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I agree with Bones. You said margin for error. You're not going to get as many chances as you're used to getting with so many guys out of the lineup. So, Adam Lowry goes in on a breakaway. You got to score. Kyle Connors, got an open net. You got to put it on. And they didn't capitalize on their chances. Minnesota didn't. And, I think Hellebuck would probably like that second one back for sure. You don't see too many on Hellebuck, Huss, that, hit him or squeak through his arm and his body and go in. Usually if he can see it on a shot like that one, he is able to stop it. And it didn't happen yesterday. And the Jets are at 21-13-1. And bit of a, you kind of saw this happening at the end of last week with that schedule and the injuries. I know we're talking about excuses, but when you're missing the number of guys that they are, it's certainly tough. And pull up the January schedule here, as you got all the Canadian teams: Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, Tampa on the 6th, Vancouver. Again, thankfully you're home for a bit and you can recover from what we had. But this schedule in January it's like every second night for the whole month, and again another another grinder, and someone's going to have to step up and put some pucks in the net.
Well, it'll be a hell of a lot easier to handle that if they can get a little bit of, some of the reinforcements back. It was a different look last night, as we mentioned, piling up that top line. A little bit different today in practice, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. By the way, I'm already seeing people talk about in chat. Yes, there will be another qualifying race today and another one tomorrow. 2 more chances to get in for the final of the Marbles Tournament of Champions, brought to you by our friends at Consolidated Supply. So make sure to be with us after Gord Miller joins us. It'll be in and around 2:45. We'll open it up. And again, if you haven't been able to qualify yet, you also have time to go to winnipegsportstalk.com/marbles and register there. We'll be pulling 3 more names. And I guess maybe we'll announce those tomorrow on the program so people know. So there you go. Last call to get in on the auxiliary way to qualify on the website. But today and tomorrow, 2 more marble races, 3 more marbles each day going in for the big one on Friday afternoon. So, before we get to today's practice, why don't we hear a little bit of what Rick Bowness had to say after the game and discuss it? Because, listen, he and his coaching staff are trying a lot of different things right now. I think they've really been forced into it. But one of the things that I know they don't want to change is their pressure in the neutral zone. And that was something that last night that wasn't there at the normal level we've come to expect from the Winnipeg Jets. And this is what Bones had to say on their lack of controlling the neutral zone.
I would say it's like a few other things. The details are off a little bit. It's not as strong as it once was, but I think that kind of goes into our whole 5-on-5 right now. It's not as strong as it was. Our attention to detail is not there. Yeah.
And so with so many new bodies in the lineup, can that be chalked up to be, one of the major things behind the issue, or is that a scapegoating?
Yeah, that's a scapegoat. They know what we're supposed to be doing. So.
All right, so there's Rick Bowness, and listen, I think that there's a lot of pride that Rick has in his team in the way that they are gutting these games out. But obviously, it becomes problematic when you're losing these hockey games, and they have said this, and he's said it if you've listened to it. I mean, there's a no excuses mentality of this hockey club. Maybe some fans will have some, but I mean, it doesn't do the team any benefit to feel sorry for themselves. And I don't think they have been. What'll help them is to find a way to win a hockey game on Thursday night against the Vancouver Canucks. But Bones talked about, in the situation that they're in, if their game has to evolve at all. Here's what he had to say on that topic.
It's not, it's, if you watch them, first of all, like our dumpings, how many times their goalie get out of the net and stop it. So if we have to dump it in, we're not putting it in where we can get it back. Second, they were just getting it and they'll play flipping it out. Like they weren't spending a whole lot of time in their zone. If they didn't have a play, their wingers just flew out. It goes back to putting the puck in where we have to take away their time to do those things. So it goes back to our details of putting it in, making it harder for them to do that. But that's really all they were doing, getting it, flipping it out, slamming it around the boards. So they were able to do that because they got the lead. And if we had the lead, they're going to have to do a different game plan. They got that 2-0 lead, and they were able to do those things. So the onus goes back on us is to not make it that easy for them to do those things and sit on it.
All right, there's Bones on a little bit more on last night's game. And Remo, as we talked about it right off the bat, I mean, those 2 goals that got in on Hellebuck, the missed opportunity for Adam Lowry after having the goaltender beat, put the Jets in, a situation where they were chasing the game. And to Rick Bowness's point, I mean, Minnesota and Dean Evson's club pretty much handled things from there on in, knowing that they didn't have to play to score. They just needed to do their best to defend a team that essentially was a one-line hockey club. With all due respect, I mean, when you talk about the real elite scorers on the Winnipeg Jets, they knew what they had to do. And listen, I thought we saw a lot of really dynamic things from Scheifele along with Connor and Dubois last night. And there were some good performances as well. I mean, the Axel Jonsson-Fjällby line was everywhere last night, but you just don't have that finish. And it seemed to be the Minnesota Wild pretty much knew exactly what they needed to do in the second half of the hockey game to basically walk out with 2 points, which was the ultimate goal, right?
Goals have been hard to come by here in the last 3 games. This is where the injuries have started to crop up for them following the Wheeler injury. Against Boston, 2 goals. Washington Friday, 1 goal. And last night, only the 1 goal. I do want to give a shout out to the Jonsson-Fjällby, Stenlund, Kuhlman line. They played almost 11 minutes together, 10:54 at 5-on-5. 16 shot attempts for, only 2 against. 10 of those shots went on net for them. So, I mean, they played extremely well, and the other team's end wasn't able to score. And eventually, some of these guys are going to have to find a way. But that's why, Connor Dubois and Scheifele, those guys are your scorers, and the other guys, they got to contribute as well. But I do want to give a special, although they did mix up the lines today, and we are planning on reading those out shortly.
Yeah, we'll touch those in a minute. But first off, let's talk about that top line. And first, we'll hear from Rick Bowness on, I guess, the thought process in putting Scheifele along with Connor and Dubois and what he saw from that group last night.
Well, they generated, so they got the goal. But, we're not going to, you got to score more than 1 goal, clearly. So their goalie made some timely saves for them. There's no question about that. But we didn't, I still think we're passing them way too many chances to shoot the puck on the net. It just goes back to our details and a little more urgency, and the fact that we fell behind 2-0, that hurt us. And if we had tied it up and could have got another goal, that would have helped us, but clearly we didn't.
All right, so there's Rick Bowness. No excuses, although he did say he wouldn't mind that top line shooting a little bit more. And I mean, Reem, for my money, Dubois had the beautiful goal last night, just an absolute bull rush to the net, as very few in the National Hockey League can do like he can. Kyle Connor missed a wide open net on a bizarre play with Josh Morrissey putting it off the bumper on the absolutely perfect angle that he probably scores 9 times out of 10. And Mark Scheifele had some glorious opportunities that just didn't go in last night. I mean, I'll say this, if the team is down a goal in a third period in a big game going forward, I wouldn't at all be surprised to see that group go back together, because they were very dangerous. Unfortunately, they just didn't have the results to show for it. And Rick Bowness would like maybe a few more shots on goal to up their chances of making that happen.
Someone said to me on Twitter yesterday before the game, like, what do you think of them stacking the one line? I mean, does it make them too, susceptible to, to shut that line down? And hey, you shut the rest of it. I was like, look, they're very injured. They need to find a way to score goals. They haven't scored any. And I think they needed to stack the top line, generate some offense, and you hope the other guys can hold the fort. It's disappointing that you had one of your, lower lines. I think it was the Gagne, Eisman, Gustafsson line. Yeah, they were on for a goal against at 5-on-5. And look, the Jonsson-Fjällby line solid, the Connor Dubois line solid, but goal's hard to come by. I don't mind stacking it. They did go away from that today, but I mean, Connor Dubois have been struggling to find a winger to play with since the Ehlers injury. Mark Scheifele, throw him a bone, give him some skilled players to play with us so he can, try and generate something. The puck didn't go in, but they played a solid game. And here, I'll throw it to the poll. I'll throw it to the chat if they're a fan of stacking the top line with those 2 guys. They're in a tough spot, Huss. I think, they got to find a way to get some goals, and they went with that yesterday.
Well, you know what? That's a great segue. I mean, a little why not question of the day. But, I mean, how do you feel in the current situation for the Winnipeg Jets? Are you in favor of putting seemingly all your eggs in one basket and having that really top-end line with Scheifele playing with Dubois and Connor? Or do you think the Winnipeg Jets are better off kind of sharing the wealth, if you will, and splitting those players up? Let us know in the chat right now. There was one other controversial moment at the end of the game, and it got quiet a little bit just because the Wild were sort of squeezing the life out of the crowd with the way they were handling their lead. But there was quite a vociferous "ref, you suck" chant late in the third period when Kyle Connor got sliced open on a high stick that was missed. We'll talk about this in a second. First, let's hear what Bones had to say about that high stick from Kyle Connor that was inexplicably not called.
It wasn't Pionk's stick at all. It was their stick. Clearly, I just looked at it. It was their stick. Now, are they calling that Pionk stick is under theirs? I don't know what they're calling, but it was clearly, I mean, he made it look like it was our stick, but it wasn't our stick. I just looked at it. It was their stick that clipped us.
Yeah, not surprising that Bones wasn't too pleased with that one, Reem. And again, you're down by 2 goals, but there was like 3.5 minutes left. And with the amount of blood on Kyle Connor's face, no doubt that would have been a double minor. And I mean, unfortunate from the Jets standpoint that they didn't get the opportunity that they should have had at that point to make a difference late in the game where they needed a break and somewhat got it, but it wasn't rewarded by the refs.
It's really, I'm not saying this is why the Jets lost or anything. I mean, they're already down. Maybe they come back and score. But it is extremely disappointing when you watch a game and the obvious rules aren't called the way they should be. And we talked about this on Thursday, and here's the picture. Pierre-Luc Dubois gets a high stick under the visor. That should be called. It doesn't matter, the circumstances, or if, maybe snapped his head back a little. And then you had yesterday, Kyle Connor gets a stick in the face. I see some people saying, Pionk lifted, steel stick. You still have to have control of your stick. There's nothing in the rules that says, hey, if your stick gets lifted by the opponent, it's not a penalty.
You can high stick whoever you want in the face.
Yeah, it's really disappointing when these rules aren't called and you feel like the game is... We had already watched a ref game against Boston. It was pretty clear they were letting everything go. And again, there was that Dubois high stick. These are the easy ones. Blood on face, 4-minute penalty, should be automatic. And I think you just get disappointed. Like, what are you supposed to do when blatant penalties aren't getting called? And I think it's just disappointing to me and almost kind of sad that's not. I mean, the guy had his hand up and then took it down. Like, when does that ever happen?
It was bizarre.
Yeah.
It was bizarre. And listen, I'm not usually a guy that is a big fan of the ref you suck chant.
I hate the ref you suck. It's an ECW chant. It's terrible chant. I think it sucks.
That being said, I totally understood why it was loud and proud last night. There was a lot of angry fans last night, and I'm sure a few people on the bench, including Coach Rick Bowness as well, when that was somehow overlooked at such a crucial point in the game.
Here, like he had a cut on his face. Here, look at this. Oh wait, let me put it up right here.
Yeah,
I mean he's got a huge gash. That's 4 minutes. Call it, or someone call something. Like, you just want the rules to be called the way that they're supposed to be, and when they're not, you're just like, I don't know. It's annoying. It's disappointing.
Super frustrating.
I actually thought that they should have came out and Bowness should have taken the fine yesterday and said this is getting ridiculous because they got high sticked on Thursday and it's screwing your team. Let them know. I mean, take the fine. I don't know. I think they should have been heated. Now, they got more problems to deal with, like all the injuries and not being able to score goals. But I thought someone should have gone out and called them. Enough of this. Like, I can't comment on that. Someone's got to say something here.
I think that would have been welcomed by the fan base. Mm-hmm. Certainly, I think Rick Bowness is a guy that doesn't want to maybe spend the goodwill he has with officials. But listen, if he has any, it's not working right now because they sure as hell aren't been getting the benefits of the doubt from some of the referees. And that was one of the more inexplicable moments we've seen of a non-call at any point this season, especially if you can watch, if you're with us on YouTube, looking at what happened to Kyle Connor's face after that stick, which was clearly bleeding after what happened. Listen, we'll get to what these lines are. Here's just one more from yesterday, though. Remo, let's go with number 5. Bones looking ahead to these next couple games as we get into the new year and what he's hoping his team can do to improve to give them a better chance to get out of this next one at home with 2 points.
The details and the urgency of what we're doing things have got to improve. That's why we're down 2-0. So the urgency has to be there right away. The details have to be there right away. They can't get better as the game goes on. Our margin of error right now is slim. And it is, and we have to live with that reality, which is fine. But the solution is to make sure the details we're ready to start games at a very high urgency level, and we're ready to pay attention to details. Some of our details off face-offs, we're not even close to doing what we're supposed to do. So those things come back to haunt you when things aren't going your way and when your margin of error is so small right now. So we can improve on those things.
Bones breaking it down, and we kind of said that earlier. There is a very, very small margin of error for this team. You got to make the most of the chances that you do get, and you certainly can't be giving out, some goals that probably shouldn't be goals to your opposition. And that was part of getting down 2-0 last night. Although I thought Hellebuck really stepped up the rest of the way. But let's talk about what things looked like down at Canada Life Centre today, because Rick Bowness changing things up a little bit. I wasn't sure whether they were going to stay with that top line because of how good they were, just the fact that they need to find offense in another way. But Sam Gagner is going to get the call back up to, you want to call it the top line with Dubois and Kyle Connor right now. And a very different look from Mark Scheifele. Carson Kuhlman back on the wing, and Adam Lowry, who has been a mainstay at the center position, moving from center to the wing of Mark Scheifele on line number 2. Morgan Barron moves in with Steny and Axel Jonsson-Fjallby. And we mentioned, I thought Axel in particular had a really strong game last night. And then a fourth line of Gus with Mikey Esimont and Jansen Harkins right now. I mean, to me, the most interesting part of that, of course, is line number 2 with Scheifele, Carson Kuhlman, and Adam Lowry on the wing.
They're banking on the Gagner 1,000 bump. Stuck on 999 games. It'll be 1,000 Thursday. It's worked with him for bursts with Connor and Dubois. Put him there. I mean, the Scheifele Kuhlman line. Lowry's solid. Two-way player. Kuhlman's a big body, but they just picked him up off waivers. So I think Scheifele's kind of in a tough spot here with those two. Try it out, see how it goes. Vancouver, they don't have great defense. I think you're going to have an easier time scoring goals on them than you did against Minnesota and in Washington, who you just played in Boston as well. So maybe you feel like you're not feeling the pressure to stack the line here. And, Edmonton's coming up too. They just gave up a ton of shots to Calgary, and I don't think their defense or team defense is that strong too. So, sure, I think they're counting on the Gagner 1,000 bump. And I was watching Kennedy right now. They said, they got the bump from Wheeler's 1,000 and the Stastny 1,000. I think it creates a positive atmosphere around the team celebrating a guy. I know Gagner hasn't been here that long, but seems to be a light guy in the dressing room. And I wonder if they're going to have any nice T-shirts and stuff that'll represent, because they had so much fun with the Stag. That was the one fun days that they had last year when Stastny 1,000 or. Yeah, it was Stastny 1,000, right? I'm mixing up and Wheeler was the one before.
Yeah, either that or earlier in the year. They both were somewhat recent.
Yeah.
No, you're exactly right. And as I said, we'll ask Dave Poulin about this. One other guy I'm going to ask Dave Poulin about is Neil Pionk. And I know there was probably some consternation that Ville Heinola was out and Kyle Capobianco was back in. Rick Bowness said pretty clearly he wants to give both of these guys an opportunity to play. And Ville had the last couple games, and I think it was also because of the team that they were playing in the Minnesota Wild. I can't help but think, if they're going to pick their spots for Heinola against a big physical team like the Minnesota Wild's probably towards the bottom of that list. That being said, it was Neil Pionk last night, and I don't know whether this was Marat or somebody else on Twitter that recently described his game as just full of chaos. But it really has been the case for the better part of this season and really last year as well, dating back to the WWE event against Spezza and the Maple Leafs in late December, which of course knocked him out with a concussion. But man, sometimes Neil Pionk's decision-making really leaves a lot to be desired, and he was very aggressive, and maybe this is part of what the coaches want from some of their defensemen. And I think Josh Morrissey's just been able to handle it in a far more well-rounded way, and frankly just has been better this year. But man, when Pionk decides to make that uber-aggressive pinch, gets beat by Matt Zuccarello, and then essentially when it comes down to a puck battle, gets absolutely worked by Zuccarello. it creates a 2-on-1. And, credit to Zuccarello. I mean, that was an absolutely world-class pass that Connor Hellebuck had no chance on the back door. But again, going back to this small room for error, I mean, the decision-making first and foremost, needs to be there, because if you're making poor decisions and you're opening up the door for teams like the Minnesota Wild to burn you, it'll happen. And that's exactly what happened last night. And I really think that third goal was really the backbreaker for the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, they had got back to 2-1. They were playing well. They were getting some shots on net. The minute it got to a 2-goal game in the building, you could feel it just seemed like, okay, now this hill is even steeper, and it's going to be very tough for the Jets to get to the top by the end of the 60 minutes.
Yeah, I agree that Pionk's had a bit of he hasn't really gotten back to that way that he was when he first came over from the trade. But I do want to say one thing about that goal. It's a 2-on-1. Capobianco, goes on the ice for a swim and tries to block the shot. Look, I'm not an NHL defenseman, Huss, but I'm not going to blame Capobianco because a lot of guys do this. I don't understand why these guys go down to block these passes. They just skate around you or pass it under. So many times you've seen that, and I don't know if that gets talked about enough. I always watch. I'm like, why are you going down? Stay in the middle. Keep your stick in the lane. And again, I'm some guy in my basement here talking about hockey. I'm not an NHL defenseman, but I just see guys get burned on that so much. But again, he's put in a tough spot. Pionk goes for the pinch, in the neutral zone, misses it, and then it's a 2-on-1. So you're kind of in no man's land. But I'm not a fan of when defensemen lay down on the ice like that. I don't think it's a plus EV play. That's expected value.
Listen, at times, the way it happens, and the Winnipeg Jets in particular, the way they have done that, hasn't been very good. I'll actually defend Capobianco on that play because I thought his positioning was good, and he actually got on the ice. I mean, the pass that Zuccarello made was literally perfect. I mean, it was the ultimate sauce pass. Like a lot of times when this is blown up, I mean, I think of Logan Stanley a couple times going down in that position before. I mean, he just didn't get low enough that he was actually on the ice and they were able to slide it right through. That's not good. Yesterday, I mean, I think they did just about everything he could do to force the shot on Connor Hellebuck, and Zuccarello just made an all-world play onto the stick of, I believe it was Gaudreau, who tapped it in. But that being said, this play starts with that decision that Neil Pionk made and losing the puck battle with Zuccarello. And I know we talk a lot about, kind of picking apart some of the other players, and certainly we spend a lot of time focusing in on whoever that sixth defenseman is, and, their mistakes are magnified at times. If Neil Pionk's going to continue playing these huge minutes for the Winnipeg Jets in excess of 20, he's a guy that definitely is going to need to step up a little bit more than we have seen so far this season. All right, so we've got these lines in. We'll talk about this with Jeff Hamilton coming up. We're also going to get to Dave Poulin coming up in just a couple of minutes. Before we do that, do have to give a big thanks to our friends over Consolidated Supply. The Marbles Tournament of Champions continues. 2 more qualifying races today and tomorrow. And then the grand finale on Friday afternoon, everybody. Do not miss it. We will finish off 2022 giving away a pair of Bomber season tickets courtesy of Consolidated Supply to the lucky winner of all of our qualifiers in Friday's race. And again, 2:45 today, another chance for you to qualify. Check out everything Consolidated Supply has going on at their great brand new relaunched website at cte.ca. And they'll be reopening at 1395 Niagara Road East on January 3rd after the holiday break. We're not taking a break, though, with the Unsung Hero program, and certainly at this time of year, maybe more so than any of the year. People are doing great work in our community, charity-wise, and also just quietly going about making their community a better place. We want to hear about them, folks. If you haven't already, send us an email, unsunghero@winnipegsportstalk.com, and tell us about the person in your life, in your community, that's going above and beyond. We had the great story of Peter and Paulette and all they're doing, in their community with the food kitchen, as well as, with animals last month. We'll be letting you know about the December winner coming up next month, early in January. However, the winner's going to get the person that we nominate is going to get an autographed jersey from Josh Morrissey. And we'll also have a $500 donation from Wallace & Wallace to the Dream Factory, which will be matched by Josh and Margot Morrissey. So get those nominations in, folks. The unsung hero in your community, email us unsunghero@winnipegsportstalk.com. And hey, with the new year just around the corner, probably looking to maybe live a little bit healthier, get off to a great start for 2023. Well, that should include a trip to Vita Health Fresh Market for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries. And of course, when you're shopping at Vita Health, you're supporting a great local company, family-owned and operated since 1936, with Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products, too. And hey, get ready for New Year's Eve with healthier snack options, drink mixes, non-alcoholic beverages, and more. Of course, Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. And hey, if you're making a New Year's resolution, make a New Year's resolution to not have the battery go in your car. And the easiest way to do that is to pop on down to Manitoba Battery at 1026 Logan Avenue and make sure that you are good to go for the meat of the winter in 2023. Donnie and the gang will give you a free test to test your battery, make sure it's good to go. And if you do need one, you'll be able to get it at the lowest price in town. And hey, if you already know that you need a battery, don't even waste the gas money. Give them a phone call or hit them up online and save time and money by getting a great price on a battery that'll be delivered to you same day if you let them know by 3 p.m. It really is that simple to save time and money and make sure you're getting from point A to point B all winter long with Manitoba Battery. Again, 1026 Logan Avenue, and you can make an appointment or online order your battery at manitobabattery.com. Happy New Year to Donnie and his great staff. All right, Gord Miller a little bit later on both the World Juniors and the Ukraine Bison game that's coming here. He's very involved with it. Fascinating story behind how it all came together. And Jeff Hamilton's going to jump on with us in about 20. But first off, who better to get back at it talking Jets than the man that's been on the TSN panel, I believe, for the last 3 nights, Dave Poulin. Dave Poulin joins us now on WST. Poulin, happy holidays. How was your Christmas?
It was good, Andrew. Happy holidays to you and to everyone in Winnipeg, and everyone's looking forward to a terrific 2023. It was good. It was quiet. It was stormy. I'm a little bit north of Toronto and had quite a blanket to the point where there were drifts that I couldn't see over out the back patio doors. So, yeah, it's pretty open, and we got hemmed in pretty good. I'm surprised, quite frankly, that there were only a couple of NHL games canceled on that 23rd, because it was a busy night, and the couple that were canceled, I guess Buffalo had them canceled in Ottawa as well. So I think the NHL was quite fortunate to got through what they got through.
Wow, what those people in Buffalo have gone through over the last little while. I mean, it's just, listen, we're in Winnipeg. We've seen snow, we've seen cold, but my God, it's just one after another right now. We thought it was a big deal when the Bills had to go play in Detroit 3 weeks ago. That was just scratching the surface of what's going on there.
Did you see the Bills digging their cars out? How people had come and shoveled the front end of the cars? That was amazing. Amazing.
Well, Dave, of course, we've been talking lots of Jets around here, and man, we've had a lot to talk about because, the schedule that this team has had in December, 5 games in 7 nights heading into the break and then right back out. First 3 games losing streak, and I guess in some ways, this was almost bound to happen considering what's happening with the roster. You've been doing these games. What have you seen from the Jets over the course of Boston, Washington, and now last night's loss at home to the Minnesota Wild?
Well, number one, through that phase, they've played some very good hockey. They've played good teams. And, starting on the East Coast before Christmas, played well in those games. But the line in the NHL generally on a night-to-night basis is very fine. There's a lot of good teams. And you have to execute, you have to take care of details in order to win hockey games. When you take away the quality and quantity of players that the Jets are playing without, that line just gets finer and finer to the point where you can't make a mistake. And it's a hard way to play, and particularly offensively, because in order to be creative offensively, there has to be, some coaches call it the fun zone, whatever, in the offensive zone. But if you look at the game last night and you start at 0-0 and Lowry makes a great move on a shorthanded situation, and then maybe because he's angry that he didn't score, he pounds Gaudreau in the neutral zone, and it comes back, and Spurgeon gets a goal, an unlikely goal for a defenseman late in the power play in the crease. So there's, essentially being a shorthanded guy, in my mind, that's a 2-goal swing. And going into the game, you'd say there's 2 guys in that team that can't beat you. And they're wearing number 36 and number 97, Zuccarello and Kaprizov. And they team up on the second goal. And it happens right after the first one. So now you're in a 2-0 hole. And then I thought started to play very well. And Dubois gets the goal. And then the same situation, you're on a power play, you have a chance to make it 2-2. Zuccarello steps out of the box and makes an all-world pass. And so that's the final line it is. Because for a lot of that game, the Jets played fine, had chances. I think Minnesota is getting some pleasantly unexpected, really high-end goaltending from young Philip Gustafsson. They make the Talbot trade, and they want Gustafsson to back up Fleury, and he's been terrific. But they're a hard team to play against on any night. When you're without as many regulars as you are in Winnipeg right now, they're a really hard team to play against. Now, I say that. I think I've seen Minnesota 5 times this year, Andrew. And I've done color at least 3 of those times, and been in between the benches to see them play. And when you're between the benches, you get a different feel for the way a team plays. There is no space out there when you're playing against that team. This is by design, by Bill Guerin and Dean Evason's design. And they're a team that's playing without $13.5 million on the cap for another 2 years with the removal of Ryan Suter and Zach Parise. So by design, they've become a very hard team to play against. And that's what the Winnipeg Jets ran into last night, a team that's hard to play against. Their 2 stars created 2 goals. They got a power play goal, so they were 1 for 1 on the power play. You didn't take penalties against them, and yet couldn't execute on your 2 power plays. And you say, well, we played pretty well. And you could say the same things in Boston and in Washington.
Well, I mean, you talk about the money off the cap in Minnesota. I mean, the Jets, are now so depleted. It just seems that it's one after the other. And that precipitated Rick Bowness loading up that top line with Pierre-Luc Dubois, Kyle Connor, and Mark Scheifele, which obviously made them pretty top-heavy when it came to their top scorers. But certainly, I thought that line generated quite a bit, and we saw just a beautiful goal by Dubois taking the puck to the net. What did you think about that line? But also, Dave, what does that do to the rest of the roster, as depleted as it is, when you load up the top line as Rick Bowness did last night?
I think it's necessary right now, Andrew. I really do. And I think that was something that was thought about. Probably, might be not as far back as when Ehlers was hurt, but clearly when Wheeler went down and then Perfetti went down, and you'd said, okay, we have to give ourselves a chance to win. And you're 4th in the league in goals against, so that's a strength. So play to your strength. You're going to prevent the other team from scoring. And even last night, they got 3 goals, an empty netter. They got 3 goals just over, what the Jets, that's what you want to do is hold it, but you have to create more offense. So I like the move, and it puts everybody in a little better place. And, let's face it. Morgan Barron is not a first-line player in the National Hockey League. He gets a shot there. Mike Eastman, I guess, is even a better option because he's created offense at the American Hockey League level in college. But he's not a true first-line player. And so you put together 3 guys that can create offense, and they did create offense last night. They could have had 3 or 4 goals. Connor had that great chance off the backboard and wasn't able to convert it. And so in looking at that, I like it. To really realize what it is to play without 4 top 9 players is what they're playing without right now. You have to look at the fact that when they're healthy, so put the healthy line back together, assume Morgan Barron is going to play left wing with Lowry and Appleton, and your fourth line has 8 options. And of those 8 options, some of them have played on the first line, second line, third line. What are you going to do as a team? There's 8 guys that are going to be vying for 3 spots on this hockey club. And, I've been impressed with what Kevin Stenlund's done. Where does he go with David Gustafsson at center? On the right side, you've got Sandy Gagne, you've got Coolin. One more on the right side would be, Jansen Harkins can play either side. Johnson Fialbi's interesting to me. Mainainen might be the best one of the group. And then you've got Esimov. So it's going to be, I'm trying to give you the blessing at the end of the curse and say, you get to pick 3 of those guys to be as effective a fourth line as may exist in the National Hockey League.
That being said, the guys last night, and Rick Bowness after the game said that he didn't like some of the details of their game. And, just Dave, from sitting in the building last night, one of the things that sort of stood out in last night's game, as opposed to when the Jets are at their best playing the Rick Bowness system, is that the forecheck wasn't as much there. And to be honest, excuse me, the Minnesota Wild were able to make it through the neutral zone without a lot of trouble last night. I mean, did you see the same thing? And where does that come from?
Some of that is from not playing together as a group. Some of that is not trusting and knowing what the other guy is doing. And, you talk about set lines, and I know lines don't say set for as long, but probably a pretty good idea when Wheeler's on the ice with Scheifele that each other knows what they're going to do in the neutral zone. And if Kyle Connor's on the left side there, or Perfetti. So I think there's a familiarity there that gets hurt when you have as much movement as you have right now. And that comes in the structure and the trust level of your teammate that they're going to do what you need them to do. And there's a little bit, you admire someone wanting to do too much, but it's a fall down as well, because if you try and do too much, you're not doing what you should be doing. And so I think that's part of it. It's just the trust that you have as a line mate, because there's not familiarity with the lines.
Dave, when I look back to last night's first period, I mean, you mentioned that play Adam Lowry made. I mean, he did that's his move. He does it every time when he comes in on a breakaway. He scores most of the times. And it was just the angle of that puck after beating the goaltender that went wide. And then the next thing you know, one's going in on Connor Hellebuck that he would like to have back that often doesn't really go. And when I think about last night's game, as much as some of the details that Rick Bowness mentioned, you've got 2 goals in the first period that Connor Hellebuck doesn't normally let in. So that's a negative for the Jets. And then between Lowry, that open net that Kyle Connor had, a couple of those, I mean, that in a lot of ways was the difference. The one thing, though, and Rick Bowness said this, and I completely agree, when you're depleted the way the Jets are right now, it's such a fine line, and they really have to make the most of those opportunities and not give any freebies. And unfortunately, it was sort of the convergence of both of those happening the wrong way for the Winnipeg Jets that put them in the hole that they were trying to climb out of for the majority of the second 3 periods.
But if you think about it, if you really are consciously thinking about how fine that line is, it's tough to play.
Yeah.
It is. You've got to more think about the details and do what you do. And so you've got to clear your mind of how fine the line is. And as hard as it is to say that, that's what you have to do. And you have to tell the guys, look, we need you to be who you are and what you are. And that includes details. It includes the fine line of doing what you do best. But, that's every night in the NHL. Like, you watch teams and you watch games and you look at a score, and I go down the right side. So the way my TV is set up, down the right side are the games, and I can flip, boom, boom, boom. And I've got a couple different setups. And so you'll see a close game, and you'll flip to it, and you'll watch, and it's like, wow, and I did catch the early part, and then I went back and watched the end of, after the Jets, I went back and watched Ottawa and Boston. Same thing in that game. I mean, that's how close, and that's the best team in the NHL against a team who's 10 points out of a playoff spot. And the margin for error is negligible. But if you think about that margin and it's magnified in your head, it's like it's what you're looking at. And so you've got to get past that.
Dave, I want to ask you about Neil Pionk. He has become, I mean, listen, there's been some ups and downs. He's had some great offensive moments, and I think he's really bought into Rick Bowness's more aggressive style. But at the same time, there certainly has been some chaos in their own end. And, Minnesota's third goal was a direct result of a decision that Neil Pionk made and then just simply getting beaten for the puck by Zuccarello. I mean, you've seen a lot of this Jets team so far. What do you make of where Pionk is at right now and what he's delivering for the Jets on the blue line?
That's a tough play with Zuccarello. I mean, he's a little thief with that stick. I mean, we were involved with him when he was still in Norway, and Davey Nonis was our assistant GM, and he loved Matt Zuccarello. And, and we were in the final running when he went to the Rangers. And the first thing Davey told me, he said, you got to see this kid. His stick is twice as long as he is. And he's a little thief because of it. You don't think the stick is coming as long as it's coming. It's a really hard tool to play with, but he manages to manipulate it as well as anyone does, a stick of that length. And that's what happened with Pionk. But, I mean, I think it's an effective pair because you've got a compliment to him and Brendan Dillon. I like the pair. But physically, he's going to get in some matchups where I think because he likes physical play, he sometimes over-engages physically. And the play with Jordan Greenway when he got popped in the nose on that play, which should have been, it's an aggressive play by Greenway. It could have easily been an elbowing penalty because he may have cracked his nose with that elbow. But he is willing to engage physically, but sometimes it's not wise just because the other guy's 220 or 225 pounds. So sometimes that gets him in a challenging spot. And when he could use his feet and his smarts a little bit more, because he's willing physically, he puts himself in a tough spot physically.
Dave, one of the other things that was a hot topic after the game with folks in and around the arena was the lack of a high sticking call on that one that cut up Kyle Connor. Thoughts on why that wasn't called? I mean, was this, it wasn't friendly fire. Was that what the referees thought? I could have been impactful. I mean, again, the Jets were in a hole, but I mean, that's a double minor with like 3.5 minutes left in the game. I mean, a perfect opportunity to get right back in it if it is called.
Flat out missed call. I mean, there was one, I watched the end of the Toronto game as well in St. Louis, and there was one, a St. Louis high stick on a Toronto player that was flat out missed. So I saw two of them within minutes of each other, but there's no other explanation for it. And they can call that a 4-minute minor and then change it to a 2. So they've got that safety guard, and it has to be called. It has to be. And particularly when a player has the puck, sometimes, if the play has just left the area, there'll be an errant high stick, and you could see a referee missing that. But when a player's skating with the puck, they're human. They make mistakes. That should have been called. And that was a gash, too. That wasn't just sometimes you'll see guys trying to rub a little bit of blood off their lip, to try and get a 4-minute call. Man, that was a gash. And as a guy who speaks to scars very well, that was going to take a little artistry to get that cleaned up afterwards.
All right, Dave Poulin's with us from the TSN hockey panel discussing the latest on the Winnipeg Jets. So the Jets find themselves with some adversity like they haven't seen all year long. Not only the injuries piling up, but some losses as well. Home game against the Vancouver Canucks and then a New Year's Eve trip to Edmonton to take on the Oilers, Dave. I know you've seen a lot of these two teams, but what do you make of the resurgence of Vancouver with those big comebacks heading into Christmas? And the Oilers, who somehow won last night 2-1 on the back of 46 saves from Stuart Skinner, but were absolutely dominated in the shot clock by the Calgary Flames.
They certainly were. And one of the beat writers for Edmonton posted after the second period that it was the quietest and off game that he'd seen from Connor McDavid in a long time, which inevitably comes out and scores the winning goal because that's what great players do. But, you want to finish the year on a high note. And when I had talked about streaking, I probably talked about it on the show earlier in the year, the pride of the Winnipeg Jets was that they hadn't lost 2 games in a row, let alone 3 in a row. So you've got to stem it. You've got Vancouver coming in, which if anyone has an explanation for the Vancouver Canucks, you just don't. I mean, their best player right now doesn't have a contract. They made a long-term commitment to a different player, JT Miller. Their captain's without a contract right now and playing lights out hockey. They've got some very good players up front. I think you've got to attack their defense and you've got to attack their goaltending situation. But you've got to be up on your toes and be aggressive. And you've got to take care of business in these next two games. You want to go into the new year on a winning note. And really you're trying to, as crazy as it sounds, you're trying to survive but amass points at the same time. And that was the idea of putting the big line together. You say to the other three lines, you play even. There's a great chance our big line is going to win their matchup.
Well, and that'll be a big topic going into Thursday night as the Jets try to break this skid with the Vancouver Canucks at home. Dave Poulin's with us. Pouli, can't have you on between Christmas and New Year's without quickly hitting on the World Juniors. Bit of a wake-up call for Canada. I mean, they've never lost at home in the first round of the first game of the preliminary round. And a lot of talk about the shall we say the showmanship of Team Canada, but not doing the things that make that win you hockey games. I mean, how did you see the opening loss to the Czechs?
That's a veteran Czech team. First of all, the uniqueness of the way the World Juniors has been the last couple of years has enabled guys to play in multiple tournaments with the summer tournament. That's a good team. They look like a cagey NHL veteran team, if you can say that about a bunch of 19-year-olds. But I think 18 or 19 of them are back. So that's number one. And, and Canada questioned whether they'd taken the team lightly. Listen, everybody's been telling these kids, well, first of all, individually they've been telling them how good they are. And then when you get the collective group together, the number of first-round draft picks, the number of high pedigree kids, 3 NHL players, all of the above, of course they're going to go in with high expectations of themselves. Is that underestimating the opponent? Well, it might be. I don't have a problem with the two Michigan, the wraparound goals attempts at all. And those kids are so skilled. And the skill level, it's hard to look at on a relative basis. They think that's the best chance for them to score. Brady Tkachuk had a chance in the first period last night that a few years ago you'd said, that was a hot dog move. He tried to go through his legs. Now you realize it was literally the only way he would get a shot off. And he's that skilled that he can try and do it at that point. And so I don't have a problem with that. The problem, I think, when they talk about playing as individuals, they're the best individuals wherever they were. And they're used to taking over games at their level. Connor Bedard can take over a junior game. He's capable of doing that. And it's an admirable quality. And a quality, when people ask me about where to place their son, should he play up a year? Should he play up 2 years? He's better than everybody else. And one of the answers I tell them is that to be the best, you've got to learn to be the big fish in a small pond. And the very best in the world are used to taking over games. Well, when you get a whole bunch of kids together that are all the best at the various teams and levels they play at, and then you get down by a couple goals to a team that you're supposed to be better than, it's the pride in them says, I'm taking this game over. Connor Bedard says, I'm going to do something special. Adam Fantilli says, I'm going to do something special. It doesn't work. It simply doesn't. And they'll get through it. They'll figure that out. It wasn't that on an individual play they tried something that would be considered a hot dog move. It was that they all tried to do it as individuals rather than look over and say, okay, I'm going to run a give and go here. I'm going to use the other people on the ice more effectively. So I think that's the case more than anything. And just on a relative skill level conversation, I was thinking back to a guy we traded for. It was my second year in the league. And I'd had a pretty good year offensively my first year in the NHL. We traded for a veteran player. I don't know if you remember the player or not. He was a Minnesota player named Timmy Young. You remember that guy?
Vaguely.
Young? Okay. So he put up a gazillion points in junior in the mid-'70s, and he came close to a 100-point year early in his NHL career. So he was winding down. I think it was his last season we traded for him. And he said to me one day, hey, kid, drop that toe drag thing you're working on. And I was just doing it individually in practice and over to the side of the ice. And I said, well, I'm just trying to work on my hands. He goes, yeah, kid, that's not your game. you skate by people. Don't try that toe drag. So he was considering that a toe drag was a fancy move, not a Michigan move around the net. And I never forgot that. I always laugh because anytime I do think that I would consider high skill, I'd think of Timmy Young and I'd say, man, I was told, stay in your lane.
Well, you know what? It's funny you bring that up because it does seem like there might be a few Timmy Young types on Team Canada because we did hear from some of the more veteran players on the club to quote, we're not going to Michigan our way to the finals. I am interested in what happens, particularly those two younger stud players in Fantilli and Bedard, considering the way everything transpired in game number one and how much attention was given those two attempts to score as part of the bigger picture of Team Canada losing that first game.
Yeah, I think it's such a unique move and it attracts so much attention. That's what it is. But if I'm Connor Bedard talking to Dylan Gunther, I say score a goal the regular way then. Like you're in this too. You're a first round draft, but you played in the NHL. You're going to tell me we're not going to Michigan our way to it. I'm trying to score a goal there. You score a goal the way you score a goal. So I think that was a little bit harsh to me to throw it out there like that. But they'll work through it. Dennis Williams will work through it. And, that's a conversation. If I'm Bedard, I'm having that conversation with Dylan Gunther and saying, look, I'm trying to score a goal there. I'm looking at an opportunity. I think that's a realistic way for me to score a goal. By the way, I've got a whole bunch of them this year. So, but they'll work through that.
Well, it is great to have the tournament back. Great to see the way it's supported. I mean, I know there was a lot of questions about what this tournament would be like considering the last year plus and everything going around in Hockey Canada. And for us here in Winnipeg, maybe the best part of it, Dave, is we get to see our old buddy Dennis Bayak behind a microphone again.
Fun again? No question. As soon as you hear that voice, you just light up. One of my favorites to work with as well. I was fortunate enough to work with Dennis. It's great to have him be a part of the international hockey scene. And I was kind of removed from that tournament for a number of years. I spent 30 plus years in the U.S. And it wasn't until I went back to Notre Dame in 95. And then I had to start dealing with the fact that I was going to lose players. It was a real issue at first, Adam, because of when the tournament is, because we had final exams that would fall somewhere in the 10th to the 16th or 17th, 18th of December. And I had professors that said, well, of course you can't leave to go to a hockey tournament. Like, what? You got final exams and in your major, and we really had to work through some things with some professors to even break kids away and make them eligible to go to that tournament. So but it wasn't until I came back to the NHL in 2009, and my first one would have been in Regina, 2009, 2010, and the first time I saw the magnitude of it. And by the way, Moncton and Halifax, perfect hosts, great size rinks. I love that size of the junior rink. I know they tried to go big with Montreal and Toronto, but if I'm running that tournament, I want that in an 10,000 seat rink and totally sold out and in the right market. And I think those are perfect markets for that tournament. No,
you're exactly right. That is what the World Juniors is all about. And it got, I don't want to say they got too big for their britches, but they certainly, the attractiveness of the 20,000 seat buildings being sold at NHL prices was quite attractive. And you don't want to be the guys that killed the goose that laid the golden egg. That being said, it's a great start to the tournament in the stands. We'll see whether Team Canada can get in the win column in game number 2. Dave, thank you for everything in 2022. Happy New Year, my friend, and we'll look forward to doing this again soon in 2023. All the best.
Have a great start to the new year. Looking forward to it, Andrew.
All right, great stuff with our guy, Dave Poulin. Always love having Dave on the program with us. Jeff Hamilton is coming up in just a second. First up, though, hey, it's Boxing Week, folks. And, man, there are some great deals from some of our sponsors right now, including over at F Apparel. Pop down and see him, 190 Smith Street downtown, or you can do your shopping online at fapparel.com. That's EPH Apparel. All custom clothing, suits, dress shirts, etc., 20% off all week. Off the rack items, including sweaters, polos, and whatnot, are 30% off. And guys, all accessories, ties, tie bars, socks, pocket squares, 50% off right now. The sale runs in store up until New Year's Eve, so get on those amazing Boxing Week deals over at F Apparel. And I'll tell you what, speaking of Boxing Week sales, you know Royal Sports is stepping up with some big savings right now. Amongst the great deals right now at Royal at 750 Pembina Highway, Under Armour apparel, everything 50% off. Doc Martens, the boots, 50% off. Dickies, 25% off. Vans t-shirts, 50% off. Brooks Runners, 25% off. Levi's jeans, 50% off. All Billabong streetwear, 25% off. And Volcom streetwear, 25% off. If you're looking for some great savings on both the Royal and the King skate, snow, and surf side, it's happening right now at the massive Boxing Week blowout over at Royal Sports. And hey, tomorrow, got a great, well, an interesting, I should say, Thursday nighter. Not sure how great it'll be considering what Tennessee's been lately. But of course, the Jets and Vancouver Canucks as well. And no better place to get together with the gang around the holidays than your local Boston Pizza. Actually went there, and obviously great spot to watch the World Juniors as well, with another game coming up for Canada at 5:30. I cannot endorse the jalapeno popper dip enough. We had it the other day watching the Canada game. It was absolutely delightful. There's some other great adds to the holiday menu, including the carbonara pizza and the mac and cheeseburger, all waiting for you at your local Boston Pizza. And hey, if it's too cold, you don't want to go out, you can always get the great taste of BP by simply ordering on Skip or at bostonpizza.com. All right, Gord Miller a little bit later on. We will have another marble race, but let's welcome in. Let's welcome in Jeff Hamilton. And I knew the minute I referenced Skip, Michael Remis is going to be singing the Katy Perry song for 20 minutes behind the scenes right now.
Somebody say Skip.
What's going on, Hammer? How are you? How was your Christmas?
Yeah, things are good, Huss. Good to be on. Christmas was good. As I mentioned to you off screen, I kind of got hit with the cold bug or whatever it was for a couple of days, but I feel like I'm on the other side of it and feeling pretty good. I'm off until the 14th until I get back for that Jets 5 gamer. So don't have a lot to complain, and certainly looking forward to our weekly chat.
Yeah, no, it is great to have you back, and I knew it was going to be touch and go with. Listen, there was a lot of things that were touch and go. Travel was touch and go. Will the Winnipeg Jets be able to ice a full lineup at times? Has seemingly been touch and go. You were in Boston and Washington. Listen, you were there. I mean, fill us in. The Boston game was a game that was eminently winnable. I mean, a really bad break sort of got Boston in, and then I thought they really flexed and showed why they've been the number one team in the league all year in the second half of that game. What did you make of the end to that trip, that final game seemingly running on fumes, 5-7 going into the Christmas break in DC?
Yeah, just to touch on the Boston one, I mean, I agree with you, obviously, in a terrific start. But if you looked at the Boston Bruins or knew anything about them this season, they were a league best. They probably improved on that since then, but they were a league best plus 54 goal differential, and half of that plus 27 was in the third period. So you knew the Bruins weren't going to go away anytime soon, and you knew it was trouble when they tied it up in the second period. Anyways, moving on to Washington. You know what? I mean, getting off that plane in Washington, I had this feeling. I was like, it's been OV watch for a week now. You'd gone 4 games without scoring a goal. You knew that was gonna change sooner than later, and you just couldn't help but feeling like it was the ideal setting against the Winnipeg Jets team that was not only on back-to-backs, but as you mentioned, just depleted in the injury department, playing David Riddick, who I thought played okay in that game. I mean, I think he probably would have wanted that first goal back from Ovechkin, but overall, I just thought, the Jets just ran out of gas. They ran out of gas, and they ran out of, I don't want to say talent, because I don't want to, be a bit of a jerk to the guys that did fill in. But if you looked at their roster, I mean, 5 of their 12 forwards at one point in this season had been on waivers, either picked up from the Winnipeg Jets or placed on waivers by the Winnipeg Jets. And so I think that pretty much sums up where they're at with injuries, and that doesn't even include a blue line that's also gone through its fair share with Nate Schmidt and Logan Stanley currently out of the lineup. So what, I think it was predictable in a lot of ways. I think there was certainly it was an up climb for them against Washington in their building. I mean, Washington did play the night before too, and did have a handful of guys that were out as well. I don't think we can ignore that. Nicholas Backstrom, TJ Oshie, Tom Wilson, to name a few. So it wasn't like they weren't out notable names, but you just felt like, especially after that deflating loss against the Bruins, that those injuries were going to catch up to them. And as we saw against Washington and again last night against the Minnesota Wild, I mean, this team is in pretty big trouble as far as getting bodies back. And look at the lineup. I mean, the lineup's been loaded on a top line. I think some people were joking about going to the bonus style of 3 checking lines and 1 scoring line. And sure enough, that's exactly what they did against Minnesota. So they're going to have to get through this. I think they're holding the right attitude. They're not using it as an excuse. They're not, obviously they're feeling it, but they're going to have to push through it. This happens in the NHL and not just to the Winnipeg Jets. And lucky for them, they're in a pretty good position in the standings to try to wade through this issue here.
Well, exactly right. I mean, those wins that they stacked up, through October and November and early December, very important right now because, I mean, I'm not sure they'll touch wood. I mean, hopefully they won't be going through more adversity than they are right now with the amount of guys out of the lineup. And then combined with how much hockey they were playing, it was sort of all happening at the worst possible time. Listen, I know we talked off air. I mean, I was nervous about that game last night from a Jets perspective as well. I mean, just considering where they're at and the fact that the Wild have been so good as of late. I mean, if you haven't been paying attention to Minnesota, they've been on a real upward swing over the course of the month of December. And I'll be honest, considering what the Jets were up against, I was really impressed with the way they played last night. Listen, it didn't go well early for Hellebuck, and normally those two aren't going in. Adam Lowry missing that glorious opportunity after Stone Cold beating the goalie with his signature move on the breakaway, and Kyle Connor missing a wide open net, which doesn't happen very often, putting it into Philip Gustafson. I mean, if those things happen a little differently, or even just if Lowry buries that one and it starts off 1-0, we could be talking about a different game. But that's the danger you get in falling behind a team like the Minnesota Wild. They really were more than comfortable just to basically focus on the Scheifele, Dubois, Ehlers, or Connor line, and flip the puck out. I mean, there were some good performances. Remo ran off the shot total for the Stenlund line last night, which was really impressive. But it was just pretty clear that once 55, 80, and 81 were on the ice, the Winnipeg Jets just weren't that dangerous a team when it came to lighting the lamp behind Gustafson, who played very well.
Yeah, and Adam Lowry has just been handcuffed the last few games. I don't know if it was Boston or Washington. Another quality opportunity shorthanded that could have changed the look of the game or at least tilted the momentum back towards the Jets. And I think you have to go to what Rick Bowness said after yesterday's game. I mean, with the injuries that this team is going through and the lineup in which they need to ice now against their opponents, the margin for error is extremely slim. So you need to bury your opportunities, particularly those ones you just mentioned with where they're wide open nets, and 9 times out of 10 that is going in. I mean, that the Jets don't have that margin, don't have a large margin for error, and so they need to take full advantage of the opportunities. And you also look at that lineup, and I mean, I think it's the right way. I think it was the right thing to do. I think you needed to put a top line out there playing together, generating some offense, because I think in reality, if you hadn't done that prior to the game, and it looks a lot like the way it did last night, you're probably putting that line together to try to catch up. So, but it just, at the same time, having the lineup that they have, it just makes it easier for road teams, even though they don't get last change, to match lines, to play against, to put a certain line up on, on the top line, and then roll, their other lines against what would definitely be deemed lesser competition in a lot of ways, just given the players that are in the lineup for Winnipeg. So, I think it will be interesting too. I mean, this isn't going to be fixed in the next week or two. I mean, I think Saku Metalainen, who, no offense to him, he's having he was having a terrific season prior to injuring his shoulder, was a key component on that penalty kill, and was definitely, living up to his his expectations on that third line. But I mean, if he's the closest to returning, I mean, that's trouble for this team. And it gets at this point. I mean, they're not treading water because they're still, their record still indicates that they're a good team and in a good position in the standings. But that's 3 losses in a row. And this is really the first bit of adversity. I'm not saying this team hasn't gone through stuff. I mean, the injuries alone are adversity to go through, but they haven't gone through, the adversity that comes with losing. It's been a lot of winning for this team, a lot of consecutive winning. Even if they don't have a big win streak, like a 5 or 6 gamer, they weren't losing 2 games in a row. And so now that you have 3 losses in a row, you've lost your last 3 road games. This is where I think that the test is, we've been hearing about the bonus effect and the culture change and all those things. I think this is this team's biggest test right now, is to get through that, get healthy, and then get back on track. But how quickly that will happen, we'll have to wait and see. But what we've seen over the last few games, it doesn't seem like it's going to be an easy task.
No, there's definitely no doubt about that. And it's not going to be easy. And winning isn't easy at the best of times, but especially when you're in the situation the Jets are in, it is compounded. And I mean, these next couple of games are going to be fascinating. And you've got a Vancouver Canucks team that has been up and down like a yo-yo this season. But right now they're on a real high. I mean, they've won. They had scored a half a dozen last night. They had those 2 big comeback wins heading into the break, and all of a sudden find themselves above 500 and pushing to get into the mix. And a team like the Winnipeg Jets is exactly the sort of team that the Vancouver Canucks need to beat if they're going to be in that conversation for it. And then the Edmonton Oilers on New Year's Eve. And I don't know what to expect from Edmonton. I mean, they found ways to win games. I mean, last night they got outshot 47-22 by Calgary, and Stewie Skins drops a 46 save performance. I mean, outshot 24-4 in the third period and still got the win. But I mean, bringing it back to Winnipeg, and to your point, Jeff, they need to find a way to get things done within that locker room, because I don't think help is coming on the way in the form of a trade anytime soon. And to your point, I mean, listen, Saku Menelaine, if he can come back in, that'll be great. But I mean, that's not completely flipping the fortunes of the Winnipeg Jets just by him walking in the door. And players like Ehlers, players like Blake Wheeler in particular, are a little bit further down the way. And I mean, I think it would be nice for the Jets to see those players in mid-January if they're able to. I mean, I know Rick Bowness said 7 to 10 days. Oh, Perfetti as well. He could certainly be a nice addition, because as of right now, I mean, the minute you get Perfetti out of the mix, Jeff, you'd sort of had these 2 pairs of Connor and Dubois, Scheifele and Perfetti, while these other guys were out. Well, I mean, to the point, today, Mark Scheifele was skating on a line with Carson Kuhlman again, and Adam Lowry moving up from center to the wing. And it just goes to show that the coaching staff, led by Rick Bowness, is really trying to find every possible solution to the depleted arms that they've got going into battle.
Well, looking at that lineup right there, Huss, I mean, you can't say they're not pulling out all the stops. I mean, that's
they're trying things.
That's quite a bit of juggling. We all know how important Adam Lowry has been to the stability of that third line. To move him to the wing on arguably the top line is a very interesting move. And one I think Adam Lowry could do well at. I just would be curious on what does that make Stenlund the third line centerman? I haven't looked at the lines today, but
well, he was the third line center last night, because
right.
Gustafsson was the fourth line
center. Yeah. And then, it was Gustafsson was the winger. And so there's been a lot of movement, over the last bit, and there's going to be a lot of movement. And I think this is, if I had to put a silver lining to all this, this is the real, especially under the Rick Bowness structure, right? This is a real opportunity for guys, like Sam Gagner, for instance. It wasn't that long ago that we were talking about Sam Gagner and whether or not he could get back into the lineup when he got moved out temporarily. Now, he's played well over the last, few weeks, but the reality is this is an opportunity for the Kuhlmans, for, Gustafsson for that matter, Sam Gagner, people who need to make a case for themselves later in the year. This is your opportunity. And while talent reigns supreme in this league, there's absolutely no doubt about it. Heart can go a long way. And if this team can, if these, unsung heroes, if you will, can lay claim, to these positions in the lineup and do, I don't want to say do their best, but obviously do their best and play well, it could bode well for the Jets down the stretch for when they do get their players back, when they are healthier, when they go through more inevitable injuries, maybe not to this current clip, but injuries nonetheless. So I think that's, if you're a Jets fan, I think that's what you kind of need to take away as perhaps some of the positives here. But you also got to get back in the win column, because as important, as crucial as those points have been and were, early into the season, you can fall out, you can go on a pretty decent run the other way and lose a lot of that ground. And, especially as we look at teams who had, maybe uncharacteristically slow starts, they're going to start catching up, and the games are going to get more competitive and more intense. So, it is an interesting time here. There probably is some safety net in the return of like a Saku and a Cole Perfetti in the next, week, 10 days, 2 weeks maybe. But I'd be very interested to see what happens with Nikolai Ehlers, because at this point, I don't think he's a slam dunk to just come back and, be all gravy by third week of January, by mid-January. I think I think the Winnipeg Jets are viewing him as, is he going to be able to come back at all? And how might that affect what they do at the trade deadline? How might that affect what they do, moving forward? Because look, that injury, while pretty straightforward as far as its repair and what it is, it's not an easy rehab. It's not one of those things where you can just come back and play full throttle. You need to push it. There's several tests that go along with that. And one of the worst things you can do is come back too early. And even if it's by a week, and then ultimately risk rupturing, the surgery wound and whatnot, and then kind of going back to square one, because anyone who's had a hernia surgery, whether it's sports or inherent, that's the key thing to the rehab, is making sure that those stitching and whatnot inside is fully healed. And for a guy like Nikolai Ehlers, who is, relies heavily on his speed and skating and shiftiness, that's not going to be, that's not going to be an easy comeback. So, but I mean, I think the Jets, just even going back to the original point, like the Jets have done enough early on in the season to go through these growing pains. And I think with this adversity, if they can get somehow stronger from it and more prepared and more battle tested in some of their depth positions, we could be viewing this in a weeks, months time as maybe not as bad as what it currently looks.
Jeff, I want to take a look at the blue line for a minute. Often we're talking about whoever that sixth defenseman is. Is it Dylan Sandberg? Was it Logan Stanley? When's Heinola getting an opportunity? Capobianco got back in last night. But I'm interested in your perspective on the season and Neil Pionk. Certainly early on, scored a few big goals, seemed to really embrace the opportunities for the defenseman to jump into the play and to be more aggressive. But at the same time, in his own end, it has been a struggle at times. And, last night, I don't mean to single him out, but a poor choice on that challenge of Zuccarello, losing that puck battle after, he did jump up, creating a 2-on-1. And listen, I kind of thought Capobianco did everything that he could to prevent that from happening, but that was just an absolutely world-class play. But listen, Zuccarello doesn't have the opportunity to do it if there was maybe a better decision and execution on Pionk. But this is a conversation we've sort of been having on and off of Pionk dating back to last season. He had that great start. There was the incident in Toronto against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and since then, he seemed like a different player. Where are you at from what we've seen from Neil Pionk just this season?
Yeah, I think with Neil Pionk, there's two things that stick out for me about his game, talking to scouts. And to be clear, it's interesting about this season, and you ask about it, Huss, because I think there have been some, whether you want to call them growing pains or, whatever, setbacks or whatnot, and what people are used to seeing him play, or the clip he's used to playing. But the scouts I talked to in-house and out of this market like Neil Pionk a lot. So there certainly is still a, whether that reflects in his, underlying numbers or actual, eye test here. And certainly what we saw in, last night's game is, I wouldn't say is regular occurrence, but it's definitely more regular than, again, what we've been used to. But the two things that stick out for me with Neil Pionk and always have was his ability to score points. He brought an element of offense to the defense before Rick Bowness set the blue liners free, right? He was a guy that was manning the number one power play for a while. Certainly had that part of his game. If anything, his defensive game was lacking coming over from New York. I think it's certainly improved. But the second thing is his physicality. And this guy used to lay the boom down quite often. He used to, tee up guys, much like Josh Morrissey used to do. Not saying they don't do it anymore, but Neil Pionk doesn't do it nearly as much since that time since that game against Toronto, where he got, it seemed like he got his bell rung. And so, I think with injuries come, reluctance to add that to your game. Maybe there's a reluctance to go all out. Maybe there's a fear that, hits aren't always 50-50, even if they look that way, or they seem to benefit one side over the other. But we definitely haven't seen that physical element to Neil Pionk's game as much as we're used to. And then the points. He has 1 goal in his last 10 games and 3 points in his last 20. So if he's not, he's no longer on the first unit power play with Josh Morrissey taking that spot. But he has got opportunity on the man advantage and hasn't converted, and he hasn't exactly been, the example of guys joining the rush. I mean, this is just purely anecdotal, but the feeling I have is Brendan Dillon gets up into the action more than I see a Neil Pionk. Certainly some other guys like Josh Morrissey and Nate Schmidt have done it. And maybe we just, again, maybe the expectations for a guy like Neil Pionk who has those offensive gifts are just higher. And therefore, when you don't see him do it as often, or when you see somebody else do it more, it becomes a little bit of a, well, why isn't Neil Pionk doing that? But at the same time, I mean, ask his teammates, ask his coaches. They like what they've seen from him this year. I mean, not to suggest they don't have a biased opinion of their teammate, but at the same time, I think he's a quality guy. Much players have down stretches, off seasons, if you will. I don't think we can. Well, we obviously certainly can't say that about Neil Pionk right now. We haven't played even half a season. So the good news is whatever might be ailing him or whatever might be an issue, whether he's playing with something, he's still attending morning skates. So it's not like he's got this nagging injury that we all know about. Maybe there is something there that's not being disclosed. But anyway, my point is the good news is there's plenty of season here for not just Neil Pionk, for a couple guys to turn things around and make what might be a relatively slow start, even for a good team and a good playoff and a good position in the standings, to improve on, because this team is going to need to get everything and more from the guys. All the expectations from every guy is going to have to be reached and then exceeded likely to get through this stretch here over the next few weeks. Yeah,
I mean, listen, it comes down to a couple things. I mean, decision-making certainly is one of it, and I guess a big part of that, it comes down to puck management. And at times, Pionk, who, certainly early on in his time here in Winnipeg, I think was one of the most reliable defensemen when it comes to that, just hasn't been the case. And, hopefully he can get back to a good place and continue helping this team win hockey games. It sounds like they're going to have to make a call-up at some point over the next few days. It's got to be Jeff Malott, right? I mean, he's been on an absolute tear through the month of December, goal-scoring wise. And in a lot of ways, this sort of reminds me of what Jansen Harkins did before he came up and played so well, returning to the Winnipeg Jet lineup.
Yeah, I don't think you can make an argument against him. I mean, and it helps that he obviously has experience with the Jets. Not a ton, but people know him. I mean, he's got that ability to score, obviously, is what we've seen. He's got 20 points now in 25 games with the Moose.
He's a guy I could see them, Jeff, actually giving him listen, if you're in the situation you're in right now and you're looking for a guy, you don't want to put Connor Dubois-Scheifele together on a line. He's a guy that I think in spot duty could maybe go up into one of those top two lines and potentially, be a guy that could help you, light the lamp behind an opposition goaltender. Long term, I'm not sure whether he skates well enough to be there, but I mean, if you're still fooling around with putting a Carson Kuhlman up there, or even Sam Gagner, and I think Gagner is the obvious choice, especially for game 1000 tomorrow. I mean, to me, Malott might be an opportunity, might be an option very similarly to where they put Kuhlman in when they got him off waivers from the Seattle Kraken, at least for the time being.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say it, and no offense to Carson Kuhlman, but if you're going to pluck a guy off waivers, not even really introduce him to your systems, and then put him on your top line for 4 straight games, I mean, why can't you take Jeff Malott and put him there? I mean, I don't think, the Moose play the same system. The expectations are the same. If anything, he would know the systems better.
It
than
should be a hell of a
Poulin
lot
would.
easier for a guy going from the American Hockey League in the same organization than from an entirely different team.
100%.
Meet the
players
guys
he's never
and-
even played with,
Yeah.
you know. And I'm not saying Jeff Malott has a ton of experience playing with the likes of Mark Scheifele and company, but certainly knows the systems here, knows the environment. And again, I will never, and you can't argue that these are in any way ideal situations. I mean, we're talking about who's hot on the Moose to come up and play in the top, you know, arguably the top line on the Winnipeg Jets. It's not a great situation, but it could be in a lot of ways a silver lining to helping some of these guys develop, because I think what we've seen this year, you know, compared to I'd argue every other season with the Winnipeg Jets, is you wouldn't even get the chance. You don't even really know what you had, you know, in the you know, if guy came up from the Moose, he was maybe getting 6 minutes and was buried on the fourth line. No one got chances. If that. He was a press box guy, and it was like, here you go. You just got a 36-hour NHL chat. Now back to the AHL. Like, this is an opportunity to see what you really have, to get an idea, you know, like, scouts are high on these guys on the Moose. Everyone who is in this organization, not equally, you know, are liked, but a lot of these guys are liked by a lot of people and are believed in by a lot of people and don't get the opportunity. So this is really the only thing I can think of that is a benefit here, is to give some of these guys opportunities that when they do impress on the Moose, to have some of that culture that we see brewing with the Jets bleed into the Moose. And then as we've talked about, you know, we've talked about this several times in previous weeks, is that I think that people coming into the situation, like a Jeff Malott or, you know, Carson Kuhlman from a completely different organization, it's a way softer landing with the big club than I think it's ever been. You know, the level of support you get, the level of player-to-player coaching you get. I think a lot of people in previous years would have been nervous to talk to one of the top-end guys coming to the team and asking for advice. Now I think it's encouraged and being done to a level that, again, we haven't seen in previous years. So all those things considered, the reality is if the Jets are going to get out of this, they're going to have to be all pulling in the same rope on the same direction. And, you know, all the things we've heard about, all the positive developments we've heard of with the culture and the team and all that, this is going to be its truest test. This is where it should bear fruit, is in bringing some of these guys up who are grateful for the opportunity and excited, but nervous as heck to get up here and impress, right? Because before it was like you had one shot. With a Rick Bowness, you look like you can play a little bit freer. Now the Jets, again, don't have a lot of time to be playing free, especially guys coming up from the A. But at the same time, I think that the culture with this team has been a better environment than it's ever been, and we might see, you know, whether the wins add up here or the Jets can get back on track, we might see some great performances from players we've otherwise would have never seen.
Well, and I think so far, I mean, that has totally been the case with guys that have come up from the Moose. And I mean, it's sort of like we're just used to these guys as Jets now because of the injuries and the opportunity that's been provided. But I mean, I think it's obvious that with the way he's been playing as of late, Jeff Malott is the next man up. But Alex Limoges as well, who's had a real strong season, I think could certainly be a possibility for the Winnipeg Jets for a call-up situation. Obviously, we'll find out what the team is doing tomorrow when Rick Bowness speaks before the game against the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, a lot of this is cap-related as well. The longer they can hold off calling people up, the better it is for them. And I guess with the teams both here in Winnipeg, that is a luxury that if they know they've got a healthy roster, they don't necessarily need to do that. But I still think over the course of the next few days, we will see a call up, and I certainly expect it to be Jeff Malott. Hammer, before we go, this is our last visit of 2022 on WST. It's been a good one. Any large-scale New Year's resolutions for you that you've been considering before we get to midnight on Friday?
You know, it's funny you say that because it's a question I've been asking a lot of other people without actually having any of solid answers on my own. However, I see the calendar flip as a very therapeutic thing. You know, I think it's a clean slate. So if you might not be happy with what direction you're going, or you might not be happy with things, you know, in your personal life or professional life, I just feel like once the calendar turns, it's like everyone gets a new slate, a new fresh start. So to me, I think it's just going to be focusing on things that matter the most, Professionally, I certainly have a fair amount of goals. I want to do more investigative work. I want to, continue to cover this team, cover the Bombers. Personally, I got into meditation a lot over COVID, and it's kind of taken on a new life of its own. So I want to continue, that journey and just being good to people. The world is a lot of crap in this world, and so anything good you can put into it will help balance that. So no hardcore goals, but certainly some themes in mind as we get into 2023 here.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're one of our faves, man. I always appreciate our chats, great times, and I will look forward to doing it with you. Plenty coming up in 2023. All the best to you and the fam, my friend. Have a great weekend and enjoy a few days off after such a busy run for you heading into Christmas. Yeah,
I definitely will take this full advantage of this stretch here. Just relax, take it easy, maybe get out of Dodge once or twice, who knows. But certainly thanks for having me on, Huss. Always appreciate my hits and love what you guys are doing and what you've grown. The platform you've offered people like me, but also people who tune in every day and get an opportunity to share their opinions. As I say after every interview, it's they're what makes this all work. So certainly a special thing, and glad to be a part of it for sure.
Hey, the great guests don't hurt at all either. Thanks for doing this, buddy.
Thanks a lot, my man.
All right, there is Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press with us. Hey, we got to give a big happy new year and shout out to our friends at Princess Auto. Getting into the meat of the curling season, and we'll certainly crank up the Princess Auto curling reports as we get into January. A lot of interesting things happening on the Pebble as we get closer to the Briar and closer to the Scotties. The big news over the course of the weekend, and something that I brought up with Ted last week, was the potential of Brad Jacobs being the guy to join Reed Carruthers' team, and that is exactly what has happened. Now, that is for the Grand Slams. Don't believe Brad Jacobs is available or eligible. I'm not sure how that works, but for the Manitoba Championship. So Reed is going to need to find a high-end player to join that team as they look to try to win Manitoba. But man, Manitoba's tough, especially with the Dunstone rink and what they've done so far this year. We'll be all over it as we get into January. And of course, Princess Auto, great sponsors of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Winnipeg Sports Talk, and curling, including Team Carruthers and Team Jennifer Jones. And Princess Auto is also the spot where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Pop down and see them at one of two Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. And you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. And of course, heading into the new year, I actually do have a few resolutions. One of them, and we should probably all get to this, is to drink more water. I've not done enough. I'm going to use Ken Wiebe, the most hydrated man in the business, as my role model. But the best way to do that is get hooked up with the great water system from our friends at Culligan Water. They've been the experts at the water game in Winnipeg and Southern Manitoba for over 65 years, family owned, and they really have everything we need heading into 2023. Water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, drinking water systems, and citywide water delivery services, and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Whatever you need, Culligan's there for you. Pop down and see him at 1200 Sargent Avenue, 694-5180 on the horn, or find out everything they can do for you and your family online at drinkculligan.com. And speaking of drinking, I know there'll be a few cocktails tipped on New Year's Eve coming up heading into 2023. And if you're getting ready to entertain or just want a great whiskey, start off with Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, Canadian Club. And of course, you can pick up Canadian Club, official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and WST, at your local Manitoba liquor marts. And speaking of you Bomber fans, don't miss that Jim Beam display in the 20 largest liquor marts this month, because when you buy a bottle of Jim Beam, you'll also get a free Winnipeg Blue Bombers collector glass featuring either Zach Caleros, Adam Bighill, or Nick Dembski. Huge shout out and thanks to the Beam Suntory fam for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk as well. All right. In about 5 minutes, we'll open up registration for the marble race. So be sure to be paying attention in chat. But right now, just before he calls this afternoon's game against Canada, And in their next matchup at the World Junior Hockey Championships, we've got Gord Miller to talk a little World Juniors. And of course, the upcoming game of which he was quite involved in making happen, Team Ukraine and the Bisons coming up on January 9th. So let's bring in Gord right now and see what how things are going on in Halifax, Gord.
It's been fantastic. It's just, it's weird. Like last night, Czechia was beating Austria 9-0 in the third period. Huge crowd at the game, and they're just cheering on Austria, trying to get them a goal. And the Austrians had like a 2-on-1 and a late chance, and the crowd's going crazy. It was the best 9-0 game I've ever seen. I mean, it was amazing. And I think that everywhere you go, people are talking about it. They're embracing it. It's here and in Moncton. It's just been fantastic. And it just feels, as you said, after a couple of years, it just feels right again, which is great.
Well, I'll tell you what, for Jet fans, especially here, our old pal Dennis Bayak doing some games, it felt right again. It was great to hear that we, of course, you doing your thing and along with Dennis. I have to quickly ask you about Team Canada. I don't think a lot of people are used to Canada losing early on in the first round. I mean, what did you make of Canada's performance and their loss to the Czechs?
First time they've ever lost the tournament opener on home ice. First time ever. So, yeah, I think, we thought Czechia would be pretty good. And, Canada got an early jump. I think they maybe, might have bought into the hype about how good they are. And the Czechs played hard. And then, get the 5-minute major to Zach Dean. Czechs scored twice. Thomas Suhanik, the goaltender, was excellent. And, the Czechs were full value for that win. And absolutely. And so now Canada regroups and sees where they go from here. But I think that, it's an example of, when will beats skill sometimes, and the Czechs showed a lot of will.
That being said, sometimes it's good to get the wake-up call earlier in the tournament as opposed to the semifinal, which has happened before for Canada. What do you think this does for the Canadians moving forward into this afternoon's game?
Well, I think it certainly focuses them, right? I think there's that. And I think you're right. I mean, in the old format, the straight round robin, one loss like that could cost you the gold medal. Now we've seen teams lose twice and win gold. So, you certainly try to get better every day. I think they'll certainly look at being more disciplined. They'll certainly look at being more, let's just say, basic with their approach to things, maybe a little less fancy, and go from there.
Gord Miller's with us from Halifax, the World Junior Hockey Championship. But actually, the reason why we wanted to get Gord on was to talk about an event coming up January 9th, Canada Life Center, the Ukrainian national under-25 team taking on the Manitoba Bisons. And Gord, this is a really interesting story, how this entire thing came together. Take us back to late November, if you would, and fill us in on your role and how this event and this tour came to be.
It actually starts in Manitoba around this time last year. So I've done some work. I have friends with the Ukrainian Ice Hockey Federation. Their federation president's a good friend, and they came through Manitoba last year on a bit of a fact-finding tour. They wanted to learn about grassroots development. They talked with Manitoba Minor Hockey. They talked with the Manitoba Junior League. They wanted to get some ideas on how to develop their programs, and I put them in touch with people that could help them with that. Then, of course, the Russian invasion changed everything. And in the summer at the World Junior Hockey Championship in Edmonton, I was talking with one of the senior people from the Ukrainian Federation who pointed out they had qualified for the World University Games in Lake Placid, New York in January of 23, but thought they wouldn't be able to go. How would you get the team together? Where would they practice? Who would they play against? It just seemed logistically impossible, which is a big disappointment because qualifying for that tournament was a big accomplishment for Ukraine. Jay Woodcroft, the coach of the Oilers, was there with Brad Holland, the assistant GM, and we started talking, what about a tour? What could we do? And Jay Woodcroft said, well, Ian Herbers, the head coach of the University of Alberta, used to be an assistant for the Oilers. Let's talk to him. So I called Ian. The next week, I'm on a conference call with the Canada West coaches, and they're like, yeah, we're in. And so we, and those schedules are hard, right? Because university teams have pretty tight schedules, especially during the holidays. And we worked through that, and and it just kept growing from there. And I have to say that the University of Manitoba was unbelievable. Their head coach talked to the Winnipeg Jets, and then I got a text from Mark Chipman saying, well, what could we do to help? And I said, well, you could push tickets. I don't know, whatever you want. He said, how about our arena? And I said, well, Mark, we can't afford to rent an NHL arena. And he said, no, we'll take care of that. He said, don't worry about that. I said, well, Mark, then we had to work on dates and came up with January 9th. And I said, well, Mark, how are we going to sell an NHL building? Like that's a lot to ask. And he kind of laughed and he said, I thought you knew Manitobans better than that, Gord. And so, yes, you're right. And so, we got some corporate partners on board. Tim Hortons jumped on right away. Sobeys, Sporting Life, Bell have all jumped on board. Ticketmaster waived the concession fee for the tickets. The Mitchell Family Foundation has made a contribution. Air Canada's giving some out with plane tickets. It's really been remarkable how the community has rallied around this, and not just the community of hockey has always been amazing, but the corporate community, the Ukrainian communities. There's going to be a big dinner for the Ukrainian team on January the 6th, I think, in Winnipeg, because that's Orthodox Christmas. They're having a big Christmas dinner for them. We've partnered with the Canada-Ukraine Foundation and the Canadian Friends of Hockey in Ukraine, who are going to receive a lot of the funds from this. It's just been remarkable. And the only way to describe it is I feel like I threw a bunch of Lego blocks on the floor and a bunch of people got together and built a skyscraper out of it. And I just, I'm just the one who has the connections. I'm the one that knows the people to call for, I talk to NHL people how to get buses. Marriott Hotels have been unbelievable. The Delta in Winnipeg has been incredible. Like it's just astonishing how it's come together. And now that the team is on its way, getting them out of Ukraine was very difficult. Some of the players were in the military. And so getting them from Kyiv to Warsaw when the power's been out for most of the last week, the train tracks have been destroyed by aerial bombardment. Got to get them through Pearson Airport in Toronto. It's just been, it's amazing. I think, it's a small thing. This is not, this isn't going to change the world. But I think in terms of, raising money, raising awareness, and raising the spirits of people, these games are going to be televised back in Ukraine. And I think that we're doing a little bit of good here. That's a nice thing to do for the holidays.
Well, and you know what I mean? This hits so close to home here in Winnipeg particular, but I'll say at Edmonton as well, with big Ukrainian communities. This opportunity for the Ukrainians to come over, play at a high level, prepare for this event, but also connect with the Ukrainian communities here in Canada, I think will be very impactful for both them as well as so many Ukrainians that are right here in cities like Winnipeg fleeing what's happening on the other side of the world.
And there are, to my understanding, more than 1,000 Ukrainian refugees in Winnipeg. There's something like 3,000 in Manitoba, all over Alberta and Saskatchewan as well. The tour begins at the University of Saskatchewan on Friday. I think that, part of this is uplifting for sure. And I think, part of the narrative is the resilience and toughness of the Ukrainian people who are withstanding this and fighting back. But I think we have to remember, too, they're suffering. And the suffering in Ukraine is real, and it is widespread, and aid and help is needed. And so that's one of the things we can do is we can raise money and raise awareness to make sure that, medical help and food and clothing in a cold winter when the power's out a lot is really important. And look, I mean, it's really difficult for Ukrainians. When you're on a Zoom call with them and the air raid sirens are going off, and some of the people that I'm talking with have their children with them who are huddling in basements, and kids are doing their school in the metro stations so they can be underground. It does hit home, and I think there's little things we can do, and this is one of them.
It's certainly an opportunity for both Canadians and Ukrainians alike to come out for a great night of hockey and show their support. And now that you've mentioned that this is going to be televised back in the Ukraine, I would imagine that Ukrainians and Canadians as well will certainly step up in cities like Winnipeg on January 9th to show their support. I can tell you, I was just before Christmas popped into a little Ukrainian restaurant to grab some pierogies and stuff before, and there's a big display about the game. There's a mention of that dinner. And, considering everything that community has been through over the last year plus, this is a way to bring people together and show, I think, the spirit of what the Ukrainians have shown as well in what is a war.
Yeah, and Husley's going to be at the Ukrainians are also going to be the Ukrainian team's going to be at the Jets game on the 8th. The Jets are going to play host to them on the 8th, which is fantastic. The Jets are dedicating the 50-50 lottery that night to this cause, to the Canada-Ukraine Foundation, and to Save Ukrainian Hockey Dream. There'll be some merchandise for sale. I think I have one moment. I just happen to have something nearby here.
Wonderful.
I just happen to have. I should have had it closer by. I wasn't prepared, but we have some merchandise from Fanatics. Hockey Can't Stop.
Oh, that's awesome.
There you go. So that'll be for sale at the games and in the Jets stores. That's limited edition merchandise. There's a little plug for you. But it's going to be great. I think that imagine, talking to the Ukrainian players over the last couple of months, imagine where they are and thinking they probably never will get to play in the university games. And then hearing about this tour and thinking they're going to be guests at an NHL game in Calgary on New Year's Eve, at the Jets game. They're going to play in a National Hockey League arena. If you had told them that in August, they'd have thought that was about as likely as flying to the moon. This is an experience for them that is just completely out of their frame of reference. And I think for them to experience it, for the people in Ukraine to be able to watch it on television, and for us to be part of it is really something.
Well, Gord, you mentioned Husley. That's the best anthem in the game, period.
Oh, I can't. I'm flying in for the game in Winnipeg. I've got a game in Philadelphia the night before, but I'm hopping on a 6 a.m. flight to get to Winnipeg that day. I can't wait. I'm so happy that so many people have come together on this. Got to get their gear to Saskatoon. That's if anyone gets some spare skates and sticks, we might need them. But barring that, it should be fantastic.
January 9th, Canada Life Center, the Hockey Can't Stop Tour will be here in Winnipeg. The Manitoba Bisons, Mike Sarant's club, taking on Team Ukraine.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mike Sarant has been unbelievable. Mike has been, just from day one, Mike has been incredible. And I can't say enough good things about him, the other Canada West coaches. But Mike has really gone the extra mile to reach out to the Ukrainian community, reach out to the Jets, to make sure this happens and to adjust his schedule. The game on the 9th isn't ideal for them in terms of timing, but he agreed to play it, and it's just fantastic.
Well, and the other thing, I think, outside of all the goodwill and money to be raised, people are going to see just how high a quality the hockey is in youth sports if they haven't already, Gord. Yeah,
and I think for the Ukrainian team, really important for them too to get ready for the university games. I mean, they want to play well. They want to show well. They haven't had a chance to play much this season. So this is a big opportunity for them.
I guess the simplest way to support this is to put some butts in seats, grab tickets. All the fees are waived. Ticketmaster for January 9th. And in addition to supporting and being at the game, Gord, is there any other way people can help?
Sure, you can donate to the Canada-Ukraine Foundation. You can donate to SaveUkrainianHockeyDream.org. You can certainly make sure that you talk to your local politicians about making sure they support Ukraine and that the Canadian government continue to support people in Ukraine. And I think that just it's great to put a Ukrainian flag on your social media. It's great to put a flag on your car, all those things. But I think the step up and actually show our support is great. The tickets aren't that expensive. It's like $15-20 to go. Be a great night at Canada Life Center. I look forward to seeing everyone there.
Well, Gord, thank you so much for taking the time and your involvement on this. We'll look forward to seeing you January 9th here in Winnipeg. But in the meantime, I know you got to get to the rink. Have a great call this afternoon, and hopefully we'll have a nice result for the Canadians after that misstep in game number 1 at the tourney.
It's a very, very, very festive fireplace and tree. I'm very, I feel very festive all of a sudden.
Hey, we wanted to make it warm for you, Gord, and certainly
I'm going to warm my hands by your fire.
Doing your best. Have a great call. We'll see you in the peg. Thanks so much for doing this.
That was good.
All right, great stuff with Gord Miller. And we are going to have a ticket giveaway for WST members next week. So shout out to all you members. We'll send something out for that after the weekend as we get into the new year. But needless to say, this is a game that I think will be a really, really fun event and certainly worthwhile supporting if you are able. So get to Ticketmaster, and hopefully we'll see you there on January the 9th. Marbles registration open, ! Marbles. We had a little bit of a gremlin with one of the bots we're using. We've got a working bot now, though, so we should be good. But if you just want to make sure if you did it right at the start and maybe took off for a few minutes, do it again. We'll close that up in just a second. Hey, I got to give a big thanks to the Nick and Nicky DQ group. I practiced what I preached, folks. I said that a DQ ice cream cake would be a great addition to a Christmas dinner, and got one from Nick and Nicky for the family Christmas feast. And it, of course, was a big hit. What I didn't know is they now have blizzard cakes as well. I was very intrigued as to what those blizzard cakes are. Check them out at one of the 4 Nick and Nicky DQs. And the best part about going to pick it up was the fact that I got to jump on the bacon 2-cheese stack burger, which I think is one of my top favorite burgers in the entire fast food game. 4 locations for Nick and Nicky: DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. And hey, if you do want to get one custom made for an upcoming event, hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba. And hey, with New Year's Eve coming up this weekend, Jets taking on the Oilers. Great day to celebrate going into the new year. And if you're going to be including beer with your celebrations, make sure you do it up and get the best in local beer, our favorite Little Brown Jug. Of course, the 1919 is really where you want to start with, the iconic flagship brand. But man, they've got some incredible beers right now for the winter time, including that new Good Times variety pack, which is available throughout the city at fine beer stores. But the best place to go is down in the Exchange, William Avenue, the brewery and tap room. Try them all yourself. Check out the great merchandise and take away your favorites. Little Brown Jug, also delivering citywide. Check them out online at littlebrownjug.ca. I see, geez, we're 20 away from 200 thumbs up, folks. If you're in the marble race, obviously you got to be subscribed. So hit that red subscribe button if you haven't already. But do us a favor. Let's get those likes up to 200 by the time we drop the marbles. Let's get to the Coolbet Lines here before we start talking marbles. 5 games in the NHL tonight. Habs at Lightning, not surprising. Tampa's a massive -356 favorite. Interesting game, Boston and the Devils. To me, Boston is the measuring stick for the rest of the league. Jets saw that last week heading into Christmas. They're -115, pretty short number for a team that's been so good this year. I like Boston in New Jersey at -115. I think we'll be putting that up for the Coolbet daily pick. I've got Pittsburgh -204, hosting the Detroit Red Wings at +171. Vegas and Anaheim. Vegas is a -177 favor on the road against the Ducks. And the Calgary Flames and Seattle Kraken going at it tonight. Calgary, of course, 2-1 losers last night to the Edmonton Oilers, but put 47 shots on net. Wouldn't all be surprised if they bounce back tonight. We'll probably get a little piece of Calgary as well tonight at -111. And as far as the World Juniors goes, a couple more games. USA and Slovakia dropping the puck in just a couple minutes. The States, a 3.5 goal favorite when we're talking the spread, -130 for them to win by 4. And Canada, despite their opening loss to Czechia, massive favorites. 5.5 goals is the number for Canada to beat Germany. Of course, all of the matchups are there. And after the games finish up tonight, you'll also get new totals on the outrights for the event, which I'm sure the Canada number probably got a little bit better. They were a clear-cut favorite. And then, of course, lost game number 1 of the tournament. But Remo, as we talked about with Poulin, with Gord, still lots of track for Canada. But I imagine they'll want to be a much better, much more complete performance today against the Germans.
Making sure they can execute that Michigan for tonight's game. You can't have that many missed opportunities. All jokes aside, seems like they have to play more of a team game, believing that, hey, you're not just going to go out there and win, Hustler. You actually have to play the game and play a team effort. And also, I think you'd like to get maybe an extra save from your goalie. But, I don't think your outlook for Canada has changed. But, I think you said this either to Gord or Dave, but maybe it is a good thing to get that wake-up call early on in the tournament, so you're not figuring out like at the semifinals or something, or a first game of the post, round robin.
No, absolutely. And I know a lot of people wondering where's the annual game against the Americans on New Year's Eve. They're not in the same pool this year, and that's done by the IIHF. So it'll be Canada and Sweden coming up. But first things first, beat the Germans, get back on track today. The puck drops. Gord Miller will have that call 5:30 today on TSN, coast to coast. Couple bowl games as well. Arkansas 2.5-point favorites against Kansas in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl starting at 4:30. And tonight, North Carolina and Oregon. The Ducks, a big 13.5-point favorite. Oh, we got Mississippi and Texas Tech tonight as well in the Tax Act Texas Bowl. Mississippi 3.5-point favorites against Texas Tech. If you haven't played at Coolbet before, use the promo code WST for a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit. And stay tuned to my Twitter, lock shoppers, who are looking for the picks. Of course, Dusty's doing a great job calling the Spengler out in Switzerland right now. So I'll try and get his picks, and I'll drop something online. Potentially might do a live show on the Coolbet social channels tomorrow. But anyways, I'll tweet that out as well at Lock Shop Bets. Make sure you're checking that out. And check out the YouTube channel, Lock Shop Bets, as well. Make sure you're subscribed there. If you're one of our first 1,000 subscribers, you'll be in a raffle to win $1,000 cold, hard cash. All right, Reem. Well, we've got a couple more marble races to do before the...
Now I got 167, so a little less, I think, between the holidays. Not as many people watching, people off. I get it. Also, after a Jets loss, we see how the numbers look.
Yeah.
But shout out to everyone who is here saying hi. Nice to see so many names in chat and people hitting that thumbs up and helping us grow on YouTube. But people are asking how many people are in the draw so far. I got 37 names right now from all our races.
Yeah, and we're gonna add three from the sign up on the website, winnipegsports.com/marbles.
Yep.
And we'll add three more today and three more tomorrow. So we'll be in and around 45, 46 marbles. It'll be less than 50 when we drop them coming up on Friday afternoon. By the way, Mike Rogers, Bruce H, Walk with Vince, who are our winners on the 22nd.
Yeah, they emailed me. I think I just didn't put them in, but who was it?
Okay.
But Brad Woods, Brad Curbison. Yeah, I don't know if I heard from them Friday. And Jeff Bowes actually finished fourth because Bruce H finished in the top three for the second time. So I do owe him a
Nicely done.
t-shirt.
Nicely done. Okay, so Brad Woods, Jeff Bowes, Brad Curbison, send us an email, winnipegsportstalk@gmail.com. We'll get that set up and make sure you are in for Friday afternoon. All right, close it up. Where are we going today?
Let me get it all settled in. So we got 174 names now. That's
nice.
pretty
Still
solid.
pretty big. Still pretty big. Doug Phil, the Sal's Nip Bowl. I would love the Sal's Nip Bowl. It would be a great event. That should be like I don't know, maybe something to do with U of M in the U Sports season. We don't really have big bowl games, just like the UTech Bowl. And of course, the Banjo Bowl here Sal's would be a good sponsor for that too. I went to Sal's yesterday. I had a cheese nip. It was absolutely glorious. Not going to lie. All right. Yeah. And by the way, Remo rocking one of those new WST hats. I see Royal popping in. You can get those at Royal Sports when you pop in for all those great Boxing Day deals on right now. Or if you're out of town, you can always check out our website. We've got a few up there as well, winnipegsports.com. And there you are. Saw one, the new bomber version, like the WST one at the game yesterday. Always great seeing those pop out. That is a very popular style. We may have to do a little bit more on that in the future right now, but all the logo hats and the new WST wordmark hat in the bomber colors available right now at Royal Sports. Get them before they're gone. All right, so we're about to drop some marbles, folks. Here we go. I guess we need to get a little. Which theme are we going to use today from Tristan Remis?
I gotta go pick. Yeah, we didn't get a new one. Hold
Well,
on.
we told him it was really just going until Friday. We've added
I don't
a
know if
couple extras.
I wasn't expecting more. Here, let me get all these names in. Sorry, someone's DMing me during the show. I put out on Twitter, Huss, the picture of those high sticks against the Jets. People get fired up, and one guy's like to me, "They miss calls all the time. Have you ever seen a hockey game before?" And it's like, this is actually my first game. So
Okay.
And
Yeah.
like, again, I know missed calls happen, but it's like when it's so obvious that a guy's bleeding, like, come on. Or a guy's stick is under a visor. Like, these are easy to see.
Yeah. Listen,
anyways,
both of them were
I'll
both
shut
of them were a bit of a joke. Yeah. Don't get distracted by DMs from randos online. Let's lock it in for marbles. Another qualifying race for the Tournament of Champions. 2:45 Friday or thereabouts. We'll finish up with Hacksaw. Hacksaw will be our final guest of 2022. And then our final act will be to drop the marbles. We'll figure out, the big question is, what course are we going to use for the championship race? We talked about the funnel. Talked about a couple of them so far. By the way, thanks to everyone for getting us to 200 likes for today's show. Very cool of you. Much appreciated. And yeah, a little bit quieter today, but still a good turnout despite a lot of people being away, doing other fun things for holidays. But where else would we rather be here than hanging out with you, talking about the Jets and everything else in and around Winnipeg sports? Just while Remis gets this ready, couple bit of some NFL news coming out today. Derek Carr, no longer the starting quarterback for the Raiders. I'm not sure if they're hanging this on Carr, but Jarrett Stidham is going to start the last couple of games for the Raiders. Maybe they're just looking for a better draft pick. I'm not sure. And of course, if you missed that hideous performance by the Broncos on Christmas Day, it finally cost Nate Hackett his job. He does not complete one full season as a head coach in the NFL, is out at a 4-11. Russell Wilson, I mean, I said this before the last couple of months that this was now in the mix for the worst trade of all time. Can we just say now it is the worst trade of all time? I think this is actually worse than the Herschel Walker trade from the Vikes and the Cowboys way back when. An absolute mess, and that was just an embarrassment, getting a 50 burger dropped on you by Baker Mayfield and what's left of the Los Angeles Rams on Christmas Day. And then, of course, there's Tom Brady. Congratulations to Brady, who managed to outduel Cardinals third stringer Trace McSorley in overtime to maintain a very slim one-game lead, still at under 500 in the NFC South. The NFC South, the best argument for relegation in the NFL, or maybe a change at least to the playoff system. All right, Remo, what's the word?
Got 180 marbles in.
Beautiful.
So I'm going to play the theme song and then we can pick the track.
Let's do it. Tristan Rivers music on deck before we drop the marbles.
It's Friday. Another week of work's gone by. You deserve to treat yourself. Maybe an ice cream cake or a bottle of wine. You won't go home to eat, so last you can't deny. Why you've ever given for pleasure, you might like to try. It's not a marble race. No, you separate and do worse. Marble race. Just play marbles with the punctuation first. Marble race. Don't spam or you will suffer. Marble race. You're wrong for it's too late. Set go.
People in for another marbles qualifier. Again, Consolidated Supply has given us a pair of Bomber season tickets. We'll be giving those out to the winner of the championship race on Friday. Today, though, the top 3 marbles will make it in and have a marble in the big championship race. Again, if you haven't qualified already, definitely go to the website, winnipegsportstalk.com. youtube.com/marbles. You'll have a chance to get one of 3 spots in the race. We'll let you know about those tomorrow on the program. But right now, let's get into it. Remo, what are we thinking today?
I was gonna do Coils of Power again, or what do we want to do? Was there one that we really liked that was solid, or should we go back to Factory, or what do we? I don't know what you're thinking here.
I'm just kind of looking at some of these ones that we haven't seen. What about the
What's Voz Lab?
yeah, see, I don't know if we've ever made it that far down.
Yeah,
I don't mind picking out a new one. What about the Marbles Diner?
sure. Marbles Diner. We can take a look.
Yeah, that one's cool. We've never done that one before. We'll do a quick look and just make sure that it's not grab a bite to eat in the diner. You may even see a familiar face. Marbles on stream.
Well, I can't see what it looks like, but
You know what? Listen, it's fair for everyone. This is the Marbles Diner. We've never done this one before. Again, our second last qualifying race. The last call to get in will be tomorrow at this very time, so don't miss it. But anyways, a new track today, the Marbles Diner. Let's do it on WST.
oh, it's all black. Are we good
Here
with
we
this?
go. A large Plinko style
Grand.
coming down. Goody Gravy. Chucker looking good. Chris Vermette with a nice start. Gregory Liverpool. Goody Gravy back in front right now. Marilee Gural and Chris Vermette looking pretty good so far. Here we are. Heading into the diner. We've never done this one before. It's looking pretty good. All right. Lots of people getting boosted up by something to do in the diner. We're cruising by. Goody Gravy, Kitty Pup, and Paul Carr. I'm not sure if Paul Carr has qualified yet, but he has been in the mix so many times so far. Kitty Pup, Paul Carr, and Goody Gravy seemingly with a nice, comfortable lead right now, but there still is plenty of racetrack left. We don't seem to be getting to very big speeds right now either. Everyone's kind of been slowed up, but right now, just these 3 have sort of separated themselves from the rest of the pack. All right, we've got some backup here. Todd Fratani, Netjack, Todd and Paul are buddies. That actually would be hilarious
Whoa.
if Paul came in and.
What's going on here? See how they're going down that funnel? They're hitting some explosion.
You hit this thing and then it bounces you into this other funnel right now. So Goody Gravy. Oh, Gregory Liverpool just got thrown over the top rope. GFL. You have been eliminated, my friend. Kitty Pup and Paul Carr still in second and third, but not seemingly making too much noise right here. They're almost stopped. And now we've got Chris Vermette making a push. Now we've got another. Travis Spratt, Winnipeg man. A number of people just getting bounced right now. Goody Gravy trying to make things happen. Paul Carr is very, very close. You can see the end right now. No one has been able to get through. Sean Clark has done it. Sean Clark, the Polish pumper, Manny Fran, Goody Gravy, Paul Carr. Now, I do believe the Polish pumper has already qualified, Remo.
Yes, that's correct.
So that would mean Goody Gravy would be in right now. And Paul Carr, man, you are so close every time. That is tough. Manny Fran hasn't qualified yet, though, right?
Correct.
And Sean Clark has not qualified yet?
That's accurate.
All right. Well,
that hamster wheel really knocked a bunch of people up. It looked like we were going to have a 3-way, but Sean Clark really came out of nowhere and navigated through it.
yeah, the funny thing was that Goody Gravy was in first the whole time. Paul Carr was there, and I can't remember who else, and none of them finished technically in the top 3. That being said, Goody Gravy, good news. You are in it. because we said that if we had a previous qualifier get in the top 3, we'd go to the next one. So there you go. Sean Clark, send us an email, winnipegsportstalk@gmail.com with your contact information. Manny Fran, same thing, winnipegsportstalk@gmail.com. And Goody Gravy, get us your details and make sure to join us on Friday afternoon, right around this time, for the big final race of the Marbles Tournament of Champions for December 22, brought to you by Consolidated Supply. Right back at it tomorrow, Reem. And again, we'll try and pack a bunch of the regulars in over the next couple days to get in one more visit before the end of 2022. And of course, a big one tomorrow night as the Jets look to break this losing streak with the surging Vancouver Canucks in town.
Yeah, I'm really curious about what's going on with Vancouver because we saw the Jets absolutely pump them earlier this month, like embarrass them on home ice on a Hockey Night in Canada. And they were on a bit of a slide, but they've come back. They had that huge comeback with Paterson at 5 points. Another win yesterday. There is some offensive talent on this team. I think they got pretty much the same record this time of year than they do last time of year. But I think long-term, the outlook for this team is not good, and I don't think they have much of a plan, and I'm curious to see what happens with Bo Horvat, who's a UFA. So I think there are a lot of questions about the Vancouver Canucks, and I think this is a game the Jets can certainly win, even though they have so many injuries.
Yeah, you know what? They handled Vancouver pretty easily a couple weekends ago. Now it's time to do it at home, facing their first 3, or in the midst of their first 3-game losing streak of the year. We'll be all over it tomorrow. We'll maybe reach out to someone in Vancouver for a little bit more on the visitors as well. But make sure to join us tomorrow, and of course, be sure to join us at the end of the program as well for the last chance to qualify for the Marbles final race Friday in the Tournament of Champions. Big thanks to Gord Miller. He'll be in the booth coming up in a couple hours calling Canada, Germany at the World Junior Hockey Championships. Dave Poulin and Jeff Hamilton and all the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. Folks, have a great night. Enjoy the warm-up around here. Maybe get outside a bit after how brutal it's been for the last week. But whatever you do, make sure you're back with us tomorrow, 1 p.m. for a game day edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk before the Jets and Vancouver Canucks tomorrow night at Canada Life Center. Thanks for being with us and have a great night.
Oh my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.